the Serpent podcast. Brought to you by Snake Bites. Your favorite serpent breakfast. Snake Bites.
That's
Well-rounded breakfast for all serpents.
That's right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is episode 28 of Brothers of the Serpent podcast. We are here in the 10 by 10 by 10 Tangent Cube of Science. We have the official show observer, Brett England, keeping watch.
Back on the other side of the internet.
That's right. Keyboard warrior. Radio silent. But he did give a fantastic presentation of that Melba Ketchum paper last episode. Man, that was awesome. I listened to it. It's freaking great. Just wanted to say that.
Yeah, good job, bro.
Yeah, it was very Snake Pro.
Snake Pro.
So I thought we could kick this episode off with some listener email. What do you think about that?
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So this guy, I didn't ask him. I haven't talked to him about saying his name on the show, so I won't. But you know who you are, bro. You'll know who you are when I read the email.
Currently our favorite snake bro.
That's right. So he sent an email in the middle of October that I completely missed because I'm dumb. But I saw it recently and replied to him, and he sent a reply back that was fantastic. So
What can I do for you?
he says, first of all, the compliments, huge fan. I've listened to all the podcasts and a couple more than once. I have a crazy boring job and you guys do what coffee doesn't. As far as what I have in mind, I've got no idea. Here's some of what I experienced. You can tell me if any of it is interesting or helpful. So the reason he said that is because I asked him what he had in mind, because he was saying he might have some stuff to contribute to the show. So he said, so I've always been interested in weird stuff ever since I was a little kid. I remember getting my hands on some book talking about ancient mysteries and trying to show my babysitter. I was blown away. Blocks the size of airplanes, ancient artifacts encased in solid stone, and she didn't care. She was watching soaps.
The young and the restless. Yeah, right. If they really were, they'd be looking for pyramids.
I read everything I could get my hands on about the ancient world. Got into the ancient alien question, and I was into that for a while. Constantly reading about and researching anomalies. I read Hancock, Baval, and West. Then I saw a UFO, a big one, outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. I decided passion wasn't enough. I decided to go back to school when I was 27, get a degree in ancient Near Eastern studies. I specialized in the archaeoastronomy and cultural practices of Neolithic, prehistoric, Sumerian, and Akkadian cultures. I worked with some really great professors while I was there and gained a bit of a name for myself for being the old guy with weird ideas. So I wrote about Templars in Atlantis, other controversial ideas. I was very careful to be totally factual, follow evidence, and only profess observations and judgments I could objectively prove. Still, I was discouraged every single time from writing about these subjects. I was told not to write about the 1896 airship scare, about Sumerian astronomy, even about a critique about the accuracy of Sitchin's translations. Most of my professors just laughed and told me to be careful for my career, but one, Dr. James Crisp, had more. He dragged me into his office and told me to stop it altogether. He actually had books on Atlantis in his office, which surprised me. He was an expert in Texas history, writing a book called Sleuthing the Alamo. He discovered, with as much certainty as one can ever have, that Davy Crockett did not die at the Alamo, but instead surrendered to the Mexican army and was then executed. Texas universities blacklisted him. He couldn't find a job in his home state. Texas couldn't start telling folks that their local hero was a coward. He moved to North Carolina, teaching historiography and related topics there. He told me directly that money drives the academic study of history. What I could prove was only as valuable as the political service my work could provide, alongside any value to the tourist industry. He told me that and more. I graduated and moved to Midland, Texas, taking a job as a stratigraphic geologist for an oil field consultation company. Worked in West Texas, New Mexico, and Oklahoma for almost 10 years. Seen some shit. So yeah, probably enough to start. I can give you guys more if you're interested. It seems like I read all the same stuff you guys do, so it would be fun to chat at the very least. Thanks.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I think we can give that a big Snake Bros. Fuck yeah.
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely interested in talking to somebody who has a degree in ancient history and specialized in Sumerian, Akkadian, dude.
Yeah.
Yes. Answer is yes. So we will be getting in contact with you soon, definitely to try to work that out and find out if if you can talk on a radio. Because if you're like, then we'll be like, well, that guy was cool.
Put you on this other side of the internet.
That's right. But yeah, we'll be getting in touch with you soon, dude. So that was a great email. Thank you very much, and thanks for listening to the show.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, and I'm also interested in how you found out at it.
I got the chills when he read that email to me today, so I was like, whoa.
Goosebumps.
Shit.
Snake bumps.
That's badass.
Yeah. So there hasn't been any updates on the scan pyramid stuff. Like I said, like I'm still trying to pay attention to this, and they've been doing crazy amounts of data work on the plateau, but nothing is coming out now. So it's possible. It looks possible that the Ministry of Antiquities got a lockdown on these researchers getting any more information out. They probably threatened them. Just said like, hey, if you do that again, you're out of here. So. There's no updates on that. Unfortunately, I'm really interested in this chamber. What's the deal?
I forgot to start the freaking timer.
Oh yeah, it still says 000000.
We're 6 minutes in. It's no big deal. No biggie.
So I've been reading. I went and picked up a book that I had in hard copy, or not hard copy. I just had it in a dead tree copy, like a paper copy. I picked up a digital version of it. The Velikovsky's Earth in Upheaval.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that book is just. Have you read that one? It's not part of his actual Worlds in Collision
no
series.
I started the Worlds in Collision thing.
Yeah. So in Worlds in Collision, he basically.
But I never finished those. I gotta do that.
Yeah, it's. I haven't read Worlds in Collision, so I need to get that one from you. But Worlds in Collision, basically, he published that in like 40s. It's like 1947, something like that. And basically, what he did was he took all these legends and myth and ancient texts and everything, and kind of put them all together and showed that all of these texts and everything from all these disparate cultures from all over the world were pointing to actual like cataclysmic events that affected the entire world. So they were global in scope. That was what Worlds in Collision was, and his basic idea was that Venus was commentary in a sense. Okay, so and like I know that sounds crazy. The first time I read that, I was like, "What? Venus is not, the idea of a planet being a comet. In other words, like the idea that Venus somehow was had a big cometary orbit, came in and slowed down and took its place where we see it now, is kind of hard to believe. But what's fascinating is that there's all this evidence of ancient astronomers who were competent, right? They were competent astronomers who took otherwise really precise recordings given their equipment at the time. So we're talking about all the way back in ancient Greece when they're watching Venus, and their records of the positions of Venus they're just completely off. They're way off in terms of what its orbit is now. They're really way off, and they would get really close and then far away, right? They would see it get enormous, and they would see it get far. And so they're recording this, and like you look at that and you think, okay, their numbers are just way off. They were just totally incorrect. But you look at all their other numbers for every other astronomical observation they were making, and they're really good. So that makes that one like less likely to be just a horrible mistake.
Yeah.
And more likely to be accurate observations. So he was putting all this stuff together, and basically his idea was that Venus made a very close pass by Earth in the historical period.
Yeah.
And caused this enormous cataclysm. And I don't know the exact dates for what he was talking, because he doesn't have any of that in Earth in Upheaval. But I'm thinking it was around 800 BC and then 2000 BC. He talked. There's these two, and so that's recent, right?
Yeah.
What's also interesting though is he shows that there are all over the world the collapse of enormous civilizations at those two times, right? So you have in 2000 BC, Egypt is basically in a either late stone or early bronze age, right? And then it just freaking collapses.
Yeah.
2000 BC or whatever, and that's the end of the Old Kingdom and everything like that. And then you come back and you have Middle Kingdom stuff. 800 BC, there's a collapse of European, Bronze Age or whatever, Neolithic. So, in Earth in Upheaval, basically, so he publishes that book, and there's this enormous collective academic flip out.
Yeah.
Because his book was, like Sitchin stuff, it went bestseller and everybody read it, and it was fascinating to a lot of people. So the academics were pissed off And they actually still refer to it as the Velikovsky affair. Like this, it's this like where they basically spent a whole decade trying to debunk everything that he said, and claiming that it was all bullshit and crap. And like one of their main objections to it came from geology, because geologists are uniformitarian, at least until recently. They were almost uniformly uniformitarian.
Yeah.
And uniformitarian geology just number one, they're allergic to the idea of cataclysms, period. But they'll admit local cataclysms, but there's no global one, right? The no global cataclysm. Okay, so let's see, Brett's saying the book proposed that around the 15th century BCE, Venus was ejected from Jupiter as a comet or comet-like object passed near Earth. The object changed the Earth's orbit and axial inclination, causing innumerable catastrophes, which were mentioned in early mythologies and religions around the world. That's right, yeah. 52 years later, it passed by close again, stopping the Earth's rotation for a while and causing more catastrophes. Then in the 8th and 7th centuries BCE, Mars, itself displaced by Venus, made close approaches to the Earth. This incident caused a new round of disturbances and disasters. After that, the current celestial order was established. The courses of the planets stabilized over the centuries, and Venus gradually became a normal planet. Yeah, I had forgotten about Mars. But yeah, so none of these planets supposedly ran into Earth, but they come really close, and then there's enormous exchanges of energy,
But problem I have with that, and I could be wrong about this, but I thought that Sumerian had established the existence of Venus already, and that was
I agree.
6,000 years ago or more.
So what most people think now, people that still follow the Velikovsky stuff, and I think this is probably accurate to some. It doesn't look like he was wrong. It just looks like the dates are too soon.
Yeah, it's like the what's his name? That physicist was talking about. Like, he's got the right idea, but his story is wrong.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
so it's not necessarily something that was like that Venus was ejected from Jupiter, but that something.
Or even that Venus was ejected from Jupiter, and all that stuff with Mars and everything did happen, but it just happened a lot further in the past.
Yeah, there you go.
So that because the Sumerians did appear to know about Venus being a planet, or that maybe there was a planet there that's merged with Venus. I don't know. There's any number of things that. Or
maybe
happen.
It was one of the moons. Does Venus have moons?
No, we're the first inner planet with a moon. And then Mars has a couple of potatoes, but they're not real moons. Phobos and Deimos are not. I mean, they're not even big enough to be round. They're potatoes.
Idaho and New.
That's right.
But okay, so in modern times, I've read multiple stories over the years where they're like, we found some massive object out there that might be another planet.
Oh yeah.
It's got a huge gravitational field.
Yeah.
But it's not Nibiru.
That's right. It's not Planet X. It's not Nibiru.
And then all the kooks are like, it's Nibiru and it's already here.
Yeah. Or they'll be like, that's not Nibiru because it's right next to us right now.
Yeah. If you hold your thumb up to the sun, you can see it. It's like, no. Dude.
That's right. Just gonna get picked up as a hitchhiker if you do
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the most recent Nibiru scare was what? I mean, was it last weekend or the weekend before when they were just claiming that we were about to be obliterated by?
Yeah, it was already here.
It was already here,
and then it was shielding itself.
It was cloaked.
Yeah, it's like, dude.
But they're
I know some people that are totally. I'm like, I know they're totally freaking out right now.
Yeah, they completely believe it.
I shouldn't laugh, but
and it's like, well, and they're like, well, it's a dark planet. Yeah, but we'd still see it.
No.
I mean, I used to have a black car. You could totally see it, though.
Yeah.
Even in the dark, you can see it.
No, it's dark, meaning there's no light.
Or it's made of dark matter. It's invisible. Well, anyway,
which dark matter doesn't interact with any matter, so it's
right.
Okay.
It would pass through us.
It doesn't matter. No pun intended.
We would get a little heavier as it passed through us, and then that would be it.
Dark matter doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Dark matter matters. Yeah. So the thing about Velikovsky is that he publishes that book, and it was massively criticized, and
I wanted to make a T-shirt that said "Dark Matter Lives."
Dark matter lives.
Yeah, it's kind of spelled the same way.
Right.
Lives.
Yeah.
It's just
It's mixed up.
I
got you.
I actually like found a picture of like one of the protests, and I just like photoshopped one of the shirts the guy was wearing. Dark Matter Lives.
Dark matter lives. Black matter lives.
Everybody else around him was like, you know, a normal physicist, and they're just like, no,
No, it doesn't. So Velikovsky had a plan to release. He was going to release a series of 3 books, the whole like sort of Worlds in Collision trilogy. But after he released the first one, there was so much just ridiculous flip out that he decided that, because his plan for the 4th book, he had this all planned out, but he planned on a 4th book where he was going to release the geological evidence, right, that supported his whole mythological legend myth building comparison, comparative mythology stuff. But there was so much bullshit after the first book was released that he decided to go ahead and do the geological evidence one next. That's Earth in Upheaval. Oh, okay. It doesn't have any of the story or the mythology that he tells in Worlds in Collision, where he basically gives you the whole thing that I just that Brett outlined with the Venus coming. He doesn't say any of that shit. He just says, here's crazy geology from all over the world that is completely unexplained by any kind of uniformitarian or like any kind of slow process that we see now. And it starts out insane and just keeps getting more and more insane. Like he talks about erratics that like so he's like, okay, so the idea on erratics is that the uniformitarians will tell you glaciers pick up these boulders from various outcrops of rock, usually high up in the mountains, because the idea is that glaciers begin in the mountaintops and they kind of roll down the sides of the mountains and into the valleys and keep going. So they pick up these boulders, and sometimes they're enormous, from these mountains, and they'll sometimes transport them hundreds of miles, and then when the glacier either reaches its furthest southern extent, where it's basically always melting right there at that edge, it'll drop the rocks there. So you'll have this big boulder sitting on top of this pile of rubble that's called a glacial moraine, which is the rubble that's at the forward edge of the glacier, and when the ice retreats, it just leaves this like band of rubble,
berm or something.
Yeah, like a big berm, and then sometimes there's these enormous rocks just dropped on top of it because that was sitting in the ice, right?
Yeah. And in other cases, like when the glacier is going along, say, digging a trough,
yeah,
in the bedrock or whatever,
right?
Like there'll be these large cliff outcrops or whatever, and the glacier's going by, and it breaks off a piece of the cliff, and this huge chunk of cliff lands on top.
Right.
So then it rides on the top of the glacier for freaking hundreds of miles, and then when the glacier melts, it just sets it down.
Right. And usually, like when that happens, like big rocks land on top, and they'll usually slowly begin to
dig their way through.
Right.
Yeah.
They'll begin to melt their way down into the ice, and so most glacier erratics, the way you can recognize them easily, is that they're very smooth and rounded. Mm-hmm. There's all the edges that, so a big rock that breaks off a cliff is going to have all these sharp corners, but it melts down into the glacier, and then the glacier just like rolls it for centuries or thousands of years, and it smooths it all up, and so when it finally drops it, and like all these glacier erratics you see are kind of rounded.
Yeah, so you could see like where the oral tradition comes, like the giant ice chicken laid an egg.
That's right.
Laid a stone egg.
That's right, or the dragon, right? Yeah.
The ice dragon laid his stone eggs in the valley.
Yep.
Came down from the mountain, laid his eggs in the valley, and then...
Yeah, or the Norse ice giants throw the stones at the people from the mountains, right?
And then some time later, like, there are some firestorms or some shit, and they're like, now it's a fire dragon.
That's right.
And then when they come and check it out, like the glacial erratic is like in the middle of some rainforest,
That's right.
And then when the rainforest burns down, it's cracked.
Yeah, that's right.
Like,
obviously birthed the fire dragon.
That's right.
From the ice dragon's eggs.
That's right.
That's right.
I know, like, I don't know if you guys are Game of Thrones fans out there, but
I think everyone is but me.
Yeah. There's this part in the story, and I thought it was pretty brilliant. Like, one of the main characters, Sansa Stark, disappears from King's Landing. She's like a captive there, and she was supposed to marry the King Joffrey, this little bitch.
Yeah.
but he ends up marrying some other queen chick, and at their wedding, he dies like randomly choking, and they find out he was poisoned. And at that time, Sansa escapes, and she had this whole plan that had been going on for like a long time to escape that night, having no idea that the king was going to be murdered.
The short guy was blamed for the poisoning?
Yeah.
I remember this, yeah.
So she gets away and she goes off with this other dude, and no one can find her. Okay.
Right, yeah.
So there's a couple of other characters that are traveling along, and they had left the city before any of this happened.
Yeah.
And they come into a bar, and the people are talking about it. And they're telling the story like,
Sansa Stark.
like murdered the king with a spell, and then she goes into her tower cell and like transforms into a wolf and grew wings and flew out of the window, you know?
They're making it into a legend.
Yeah, it's like, holy shit. That's like, you can see how that type of thing would happen, just from like people, trying to make
sense out of some mystery.
Yeah, like they have no one knows why the king died. No one knows where she went. They can't find her anywhere. They don't even understand how she got out.
Right. She turned into some flying thing and
yeah. And there's
after,
like other stories about her siblings becoming wargs and all this kind of weird shit.
Right. And some of them are doing shit like that.
But it's like, I'm just saying that it just reminded me, it's like, okay, he's got this little tale, but at the same time,
he's illustrating how myth can be born.
Yeah, the myths are born. But I think some of these myths like that Velikovsky is looking at are sort of the same way. Like, people are trying to describe the story,
right?
But they don't have the knowledge to explain it,
right? Or the imagery that's used has been converted into fairy tale stuff by our culture, and so it's difficult for us to turn that imagery back into an ice giant is a glacier.
Yeah,
right?
Agreed. But I also think that there were, so thinking of like the writers and poets, and the musicians and the bards and stuff of the time, trying to turn it into something beautiful to speak,
right, and interesting, something
story,
fun to sing around the campfire,
But some of them, people who could write and read and that were learned in the arts, were typically, they were the elite in terms of the educated.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that they would sort of turn it into poetry and use the proper imagery,
right,
that could still preserve the story while giving it, sort of personifying it or turning it into a dragon or turning it into these other images.
It's a way of, they esotericized it.
Yeah.
Right? You turn it into an interesting story with some love in there and a princess or whatever, so that people will be interested in it.
Yeah.
Right? You put in elements of common life. Like you put in elements of, most people know a love story. So there's a princess and there's a knight and there's a dragon and and all this, when you look at the symbols and you back away from them and say, okay, stop looking at this in terms of a human story and see, what are these symbols telling me? And you see, okay, here's a big firestorm or a comet in the sky, and so like those things make the people continue to tell the story, so that later on, somebody who knows that it needs to be deciphered can do so.
Yeah.
Like, I love that kind of stuff. So yeah, Velikovsky, and so Brett's pointing out about the whole idea of Venus coming out of Jupiter. He's saying, also interesting is that apparently Venus's atmosphere billows out like a comet's tail when the solar wind dies down, which is true. I've seen that. I've seen pictures of it. It looks commentary. The other thing that Velikovsky predicted based on his evidence was that Venus would have, since it's, okay, he was like, so it's a recently birthed planet from the planet of Jupiter, and it went through all this crazy shit to get to where it is now. He predicted that it would have this incredibly dense, crazy atmosphere that would be acidic, and that it would be intensely hot. Okay, which makes sense, because if it comes out of Jupiter catastrophically, that's got to be catastrophic. The planet lets go of enough material to make another planet, and then it runs into a bunch of shit almost on the way to where it is now. And of course, everybody was like, "Oh my god, that's bullshit." Well, when NASA finally sent a probe there, and they tried to land it or whatever, it just imploded, because the pressure on the surface of Venus is something ridiculous. Like it's a really high psi, and it's almost 800 degrees.
Yeah.
Okay, which now they say is like it's like catastrophic global warming caused by all the CO2. That's what they blame the 800 degrees.
Wow.
Yeah,
But now I was looking at what,
the second one, yeah,
what Brett was saying about, like, he's basing it on Athena springing from Zeus's forehead.
right. So
that's part of it, you know?
right. The imagery of Greece that the Greeks had of Venus being birthed from the forehead of Zeus. Well, Zeus is Jupiter. Jupiter is the Roman name for the Greek god Zeus.
Yeah.
So Venus is Athena.
So he's trying to decipher it.
Right.
And it's cool if there were, scientists in the past that understood what was going on.
Yeah, that's right.
That the Greeks, it ended up turning that into their sort of mythology.
Right. Yeah. And there's a weird thing with the sort of human aspects of the ancient pantheon gods, and then the fact that they're also planets.
Yeah.
Right. But the human aspects seem to be like if you look at the nature gods, the ones that aren't planets but that are basically associated with nature or whatever, they also have attributes. Like the great god Pan. The great god Pan is a very, very ancient nature deity. He basically represented all of wild nature. Okay. And you see his attributes or whatever, and you see how they apply to the natural world. That it's completely wild, untamable, right? You meet it, and maybe it will save your life and give you all this bounty, or maybe it'll eat you alive. You just don't, it's totally wild. And Pan was considered and he was depicted as a sort of a goat man, like a satyr or what were they called in Narnia? The Mr. Timnus that she meets when she first goes through, whatever. They're like that. The goat, they have the legs of a goat and the upper body of a man or whatever. So Pan was like that, except that I think that he was the other way around. I can't remember. But he was crazy, basically completely insane and ancient. And he would play the pan flute. That's where the term come from. The flute is called the pan flute because he supposedly played that, and the music would drive people crazy, right? So there's all these attributes. So when you look at the planets, if you do the same thing and recognize that their humanized forms are actually giving you
more information about the planet.
Right. They're giving you some kind of physical, and some of them are hard to understand because you're like, how can Jupiter be doing that? Right. But that's because modern science doesn't acknowledge the sort of celestial connection to everything. Like the picture of modern science with Earth is that we're this blue. Tumnus was a font. There you go. Thanks, Brett. Thanks. He was a font, and his name was Tumnus.
This is why we have the official show observer.
That's right.
So we don't have to come back and be like, hey,
totally wrong on that.
So on the
Got
last
his name
episode
wrong.
that you guys heard last week, I just said this one thing about Narnia that was wrong. And then the week after that, we have to be like, so there were actually two things about Narnia that I said that were wrong.
It was a wardrobe, not a closet. Sorry. Yeah. It's Show Observer helps a lot. So, what was I talking about? I got lost. Yeah. So this is what makes Velikovsky's analysis really interesting, is because he does that. He kind of looks at these. He sort of merges all of these concepts, right? So you take the sort of pantheon, sort of Olympus-dwelling Zeus god or Jupiter god that is a human, like a giant human form and has a spear of lightning, all this bullshit. He merges that with the actual planet of Jupiter.
Yeah.
And gives it all those aspects and says, what does this mean if that picture of this sort of god is merged with the planet itself? It also has the same name. And you do that with all the gods or whatever, and then you see, Venus, the planet Venus, was birthed out of the planet of Jupiter, according to this mythology, right? And Athena / Venus was the goddess of, it's really strange, the goddess of love.
So Venus must have come out like north of the eye.
Or the eye may be the
Jupiter.
location, yeah.
No, because it's his forehead. unless that eye, unless Zeus is
He's like
a
laying down.
cyclops.
He's laying down. He's a cyclops laying down.
Then the eye is already on his forehead. So yeah,
right.
it could come out of the eye.
Yeah, I mean, the eye itself is mobile. It doesn't necessarily have, it may not have always been where it is now.
Yeah.
You know, it looks like when you look at it, it looks like it looks like it's caused by the intersection of two bands.
Yeah, those massive currents. Probably.
Yeah, but I think and there's 4 major bands on Jupiter that kind of I think are because of its 4 major moons, and all the other small ones are because of all the small moons it's got.
Now you're fucking us up, Brett. Athena is Minerva, not Venus. But the Roman representations of Greek Olympus isn't perfect. Well, no shit.
Yeah,
They're not perfect, but what are you trying to say here?
Yeah, what are you trying to say? Because Minerva and Athena and Venus are kind of the same. Kind of the same.
All right.
Shut up, Brett.
Yeah, damn it.
But Athena basically is listed as the goddess of love and war, which is a really strange combination. Right? Like a goddess of love and war. That doesn't make any sense. And we already have a god of war, like Mars.
I think it does.
But
But that's because I'm like, fuck peace, you know? Freedom!
that's right. Love is war.
Like, yeah. True love is freedom. And in order for freedom, you must have war.
That's right. I think that it's what she really is a goddess of technology. Because if you look at Athena's heroes, they were always clever people, like Odysseus, right? Odysseus, his whole deal was like he went to all these battles, like the Battle of Troy and all this kind of shit, but he was trying not to fight. He was like, I don't want to die. So the first thing he does is he goes and gets Achilles. He's like, hey, bro, let's go fight this war. Because he knows that Achilles is so badass that if he follows him around, no one's going to touch him because Achilles will just be killing everybody all around him. You know, and Odysseus does, he's the clever guy, and he's constantly coming up with things to allow him to do stuff, like how he ties himself to the mast, so that he can hear the siren song without going to them and dying.
Holy shit.
What?
I just now understood the lyrics in that Steely Dan song. Fucking Home at Last.
Oh, yeah.
Damn it. Still I remain tied to the mast.
That's right. That's right.
Hell yes. Thank you, bro.
Yeah.
Fucking high one.
I won. Snake high. Yeah. So Velikovsky puts all this stuff together, and he comes up with this actual historical thing, and then he shows historical data that says, okay, so in combination with these myths that say this stuff happened, we see all these collapse of civilizations. Right? All these civilizations just suddenly end and there's no reason given. They just stop. So Earth in upheaval doesn't tell you any of that. It just says, look at all this insane geology. And it shows you all,
badass.
Like I started to talk about erratics. He goes through a bunch of the erratics, but he's like, there are ones that are enormous that, he's like, so there's supposed to be glaciers, but how about in India, there's this whole line of erratics that came from the south and went north. Like, in other words, they came from down near the equator, they came and they went northwards. You can't say glaciers did that. The glaciers came from the tropics and pushed the erratics northwards.
Sounds like an explosion.
Yeah, it sounds like a big wave, right? Yeah. There were water deposits. And he talks about some, he's like, there's one in, I can't remember exactly where it is, but it's so big that it's used as a quarry. Okay, and there's one in England that's so enormous that there's a village on top of it.
Oh shit!
You have to kind of get up in the sky and see that place where that village is actually an enormous glacial erratic that's like 3 miles wide. What can push, that's a big rock. It's so big that they didn't even realize, like, this is a big boulder. And there's a village on top of it, and it's like, it's this huge rock.
It's crazy.
What pushes that? There's one I think it's in Norway or whatever, he lists it as being, it's miles long, and then anyway, some of these stones are so enormous and came from so far away that ice, even the biggest glaciers that we know of, they just wouldn't move them. The ice would go around it. Right? Then he talks about things like there are ocean surveys. Okay, so deep ocean surveys. The United States did this deep ocean survey of the Atlantic, and I know we got to take a break in a minute. The United States did this deep ocean survey of the Atlantic, where they were basically looking. They wanted to find out how old these oceans are, because the uniformitarian geology basically says that these oceans are ancient.
Billions and
That's
billions and billions.
Right, they're as old as the planet, right? And so that implies that there should be thousands and thousands of feet of deep ocean sediment at the bottoms of all these oceans, right?
Yeah.
So as you get way down there to the very bottom, when you're on the Atlantic abyssal plateau or abyssal plain, right, the deepest part or whatever, it's just big flat plain or whatever, that the water should steadily get thicker with stuff.
Silt.
Right, and it gradually becomes thicker and thicker until you're just basically in this mud. And it should be thousands of feet deep before you actually hit the bedrock of the abyssal plain. Okay. What they actually found was that in most places it was like 100 feet thick, and in some places it was almost nothing. That it was so thin that it was within the margin of error of their ability to detect it, so that it's basically zero.
Yeah.
So where is all the sediment? If this is an old ocean, where is it? Well, Velikovsky says, well, the answer is on land. It's on land. If you look at what geologists have been finding on the continental shelves, like up on dry land, that there are like tens of thousands of feet of sediment. And he's like, so the only way this can happen is if every once in a while there are in what he calls enormous eruptions of the seas, but it's like IR eruptions, right? So the enormous eruptions of the sea that basically takes all the sediment that's down in the abyssal plain and pulls it up, pushes all of it up on land where it dries out and collects there, right? So and that's why on dry land, way up high, we have like thousands of feet of marine sediment filled with deep marine fossils mixed in with land animals and trees, right? And he just lists, he goes through and just quotes all these geologists talking about like how they went in there. This guy's looking in France, and he's like, you see like this marine layer deep down below, and there's 300 feet of this marine layer, and then on top of that is a layer of sediment filled with land animals, and then on top of that there's another marine layer, and then on top of that there's more land animals, and then there's a big there's like 40 yards of freaking lava, and then there's like more land animals, and then marine on top of that, and the last two is like land and marine, and now and that's up to the present.
Yeah.
That means that like multiple times in the past there have been enormous, and this is deep in the central area of France where it's like high in the mountains, so for that to be marine, either the entire continent of Europe had to sink beneath the waves for a long enough time for all that sediment to be laid down, or it had to be catastrophically deposited up high.
All right. I have something I want to bring up on that note that I just realized, but
let's take the
break first.
And we'll come back and talk about fossilized snakes.
Fossilized, fire-breathing rock dragons.
Shut up, Brett.
Limitless conversation by two limited individuals and Brett. Brothers of the Serpent podcast. I did not enunciate that well enough. Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
Hard to do. Brothers of the Serpent. Brothers of the Serpent.
Welcome, angels and demons and monsters and serpents and scriptards. And
Brett.
imminent fans.
Imminent fans. Serpent Bros.
Serpent Bros. Serpent familial somethings.
I just like the idea that snakes are bros now.
Yeah. All snakes are bros.
Do you even slither, bro? So okay, so
snake, bro?
do you even snake, bro? Do you? So you had something that occurred to you when right before we took the break.
Yeah, so we're talking about the volcanoes, and it just, I just realized, like, this is sort of off topic. Well, it kind of is.
It's
but,
geology, right? Volcano.
Yeah. When we went on that little field trip, and we were looking at this volcano, like, if that volcano was active, like the deposits that we saw of the volcanic shit, whatever it was. What is it called?
The pyroclastic stuff.
Yeah. If that was during the time when there was actually water here, then there would have been basalt.
That's right. It would have been.
But there is no.
If it was, columnar basalt is made when like magma directly hits seawater.
Right. So if that volcano was like, present and active during the time when the ocean was here.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, the fact there was a pyroclastic flow kind of precludes any water because pyroclastic flow is a bunch of dust and shit.
Right. So it had to have been after the water was gone.
Right.
But at the same time, there's like pyroclastic flow under
the enormous
sediment.
Limestone thing. Yeah, that's right. That whole
So there's like some on top and then some underneath.
Yeah.
Sediment. So
That's
how does
right.
that happen?
Yeah. Enormous eruptions of the sea.
Like,
Remember how
that's what I'm saying. Like, so there was no water, and the volcano goes off, and the pyroclastic flow goes down the sides.
Yeah.
Then the ocean comes back.
Right.
And there's like more layers of sediment set down on top.
Right. And then it leaves.
And then it goes away, and then the volcano goes off again. But not while there's water there.
Right. It only goes off when there's no water, because the water just shuts it off. I remember how that whole huge, that big flat area of the limestone. It looked like a big tongue of mud, like a mud flow. It was like,
Yeah.
It was like, and then we found that one end of it actually, like beneath it, you could see this pyroclastic deposit.
Yeah.
And it was just this layerless. That was the thing that struck me about that limestone, was that it didn't have layers. It was a single piece. It wasn't like intricately layered like it had been deposited years and years by an ocean sitting on top of it. It was a catastrophic deposition that was all one piece. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, so when the water was like, the river was eroding it or whatever, it was just smooth everywhere.
There was no strata in it. It was a single piece. And like that, to me, speaks of catastrophic deposition of some kind.
Yeah, so that was my thought. That's
really cool. Yeah,
like why? Yeah.
And then what wore the frickin' volcano off to the nub afterwards?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, it's completely gone. But the other thing that Velikovsky goes through in this book, Earth in Upheaval, is he shows how the global level of volcanism, in other words, the number of volcanoes going off or whatever. He's like, so in historical times, you can go back to like 1200, 13, 14, 1500 or whatever AD, and see that like a vast number of the volcanoes that are now considered to be dormant or extinct were active. So you have this trend over time of the volcanism, the general volcanism of the planet, just dropping down and down and down and down until now we have. He's like, there's like 400 or so active volcanoes on the planet. The rest are either considered extinct or dormant. Whereas you can go less than 500 or 600 years in the past, and that number is increased like tenfold, the number of active volcanoes. And you keep going farther in the past, and you get bigger earthquakes and more volcanoes as you go farther back in the past, indicating that all earthquakes and all seismic and volcanic activity are like
resonances,
aftershocks of some enormous cataclysmic event.
Yeah.
And it's slowly decreasing over time, and that's why things become more stable, and
And then you can ultimately end up with things like uniformitarianism,
right? And then another cataclysm takes place.
Yeah,
and
a cataclysm takes place and destroys all the uniformitarianists.
Right. I think this is why we have like this. There's this like strain of prepper DNA in the human race. It's like built in. There's just a certain number of preppers, and there always will be.
But at the same time, it's like all of our ancient myths are like, we're all gonna die,
right?
Like,
And the preppers are the only ones that believe it. The uniformitarians show back up. They're like, no, everything's very slow, and then when they all die, the preppers survive. Actually, like the cataclysms that Velikovsky talks about cannot be prepped for.
Yeah, we had talked about that too. It was like, the only way to prep for them is to try to create like global memes that have hidden esoteric knowledge in them.
Do you even slither, bro?
So that when the cataclysm happens, whoever does survive knows those memes.
Right.
And they're like still using them.
Yeah, they'll suddenly see the meanings of the memes. Like, oh my god, I do Slither Bro. Well, I mean, you had pointed out when I said that, when I was like, you can't really prep for it, and you were like, well, you could prep for it, and maybe you'll survive, and then your prepping will help you stay alive afterwards. Because the likelihood of a total non-prepper that maybe, just by happenstance is in the exact right place to not get destroyed by the cataclysm, well, what is he going to do afterwards? He's fucked.
Yeah.
Because everything else is destroyed, and he's got like, 1,000,000 square miles of mud between him and the nearest food source.
And no survival knowledge.
Right. Yeah, so you were saying that like only preppers, like lucky preppers, are what survive cataclysmic events.
Right, but really my focus at the time was more on like prepping to preserve knowledge.
Yeah.
Rather than
building a bunker or
preserving my
whatever.
own life. Yeah.
Yeah. Bunker builders.
It was like, so if I could come up with some brilliant scheme to preserve knowledge in sort of like a meme fashion.
Yeah.
In the modern age.
Right.
And it spreads around and it becomes like these memes that everybody knows, then whoever survives knows the memes.
Right.
It's just like we have the same thing now with our ancient myths. It's like all of these people that wrote the myths, they're all dead.
Right.
But they prepped enough to where those myths spread enough to where like when cataclysms happened or when entire civilizations fell, some people knew.
Right. That's
and
right.
They passed it on.
Yeah.
Unknowingly.
Well, I know how first you need to build a giant pyramid, and then we can go from there on preserving the knowledge.
No. That's after the cataclysm. The giant pyramid comes after.
Oh. Okay, well, we need to build a ball-back platform.
We just need to tell a story in a new way. An old story in a new way.
I'm just trying to tell an old story in a new way.
Yeah.
All right, Lucas.
Yeah. Great job.
Yeah, everyone's like, yeah, Star Wars. They have no fucking idea that it's an old story. Even though it says at the very beginning, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah, what good is a galaxy far, far away, some ancient knowledge from galaxies far away, gonna do us here in this galaxy when shit hits the freaking...
Yeah.
When shit hits the sun.
Obviously, our galaxy was like a little dot in their sky. So it doesn't apply to us, right? Because the universe isn't connected to everything else.
Yeah. But maybe by the time we're all destroyed, the radio waves will reach that other galaxy, and those people will be like, oh shit.
Right. I mean, we can't hear a story from another galaxy unless it was a long time ago. Like, by the nature of light speed, any story we get from another galaxy is a long time ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Unless you had the...
So it's like the light from the Star Wars story was just showing up in the 80s. And
yeah. Unless they have that thing in Ender's Game that can communicate across...
The Ansible, yeah.
Ansible.
Instant communication.
I almost called it the Animus, but no.
No, the Animus is in Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, I know.
Which would also be badass. God damn it, that would be great. To like dig through your DNA to see the past.
Yeah. Hey, if there's any fans out there that know anything about the Knights Templar, and they also play Assassin's Creed,
yeah,
maybe they could.
Maybe they have a degree in ancient history.
Maybe they can tell us some shit.
Yeah, come build an Animus for us. So I'm gonna go through some of the erratic stuff because this is badass. Like there are erratic boulders. Okay, so he says there are erratic boulders in many places all over the world. In the British Isles, on the shore, and in the Highlands, there are enormous quantities of them transported there across the North Sea from the mountains of Norway. Okay, boulders from the mountains of Norway in England.
That's how the Vikings figured it out.
That's right. The Vikings came out of those rocks. Some force wrested them from those massifs, bore them over the entire expanse that separates Scandinavia from the British Isles, and set them down on the coast and on the hills. From Scandinavia, boulders were also carried to Germany and spread over that country, in some places so thickly that it seems as though they had been brought there by masons to build cities. Also, high in the Harz Mountains in central Germany lie stones that originated from Norway. Poor Norway is losing all its rocks. From Finland, blocks of stone were swept to the Baltic regions and over Poland and lifted onto the Carpathians. Another train of boulders was fanned out from Finland over the Valdai Hills, over the site of Moscow, and as far as the Don. In North America, erratic blocks broken from the granite of Canada and Labrador were spread over Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Ohio. They perch on the tops of ridges and lie on the slopes and deep in the valleys. They lie on the coastal plain and on the White Mountains and in the Berkshires. Sometimes in an unbroken chain. In the Pocono Mountains, they balance precariously on the edge of crests. The attentive traveler through the woods wonders at the size of these rocks, brought there and abandoned sometime in the past, frighteningly piled up. Some erratics are enormous. The block near Conway in New Hampshire is 90 by 40 by 38 feet and weighs 10,000 tons, the same load as a large cargo ship. Equally large is Mohegan Rock, which towers over the town of Montville in Connecticut, and I've seen a picture of it. It's great. Like, you got this little town, there's this huge freaking rock behind it. It's crazy. The Great Flat Erratic in Warren County, Ohio, weighs approximately 13,500 tons and covers 3/4 of an acre. The Okotoks Erratic, 30 miles south of Calgary, Alberta, consists of 2 pieces of quartzite derived from at least 50 miles to the west of a calculated weight of over 18,000 tons. And this one was brought over the central, what is it called, the Great Divide.
Yeah.
It came from the west, like it was carried over that.
Oh, shit.
Blocks of 250 to 300 feet in circumference, however, are small.
Maybe it made the pass.
Yeah, that's what they found. Huge rock came through the pass. These are small when compared with a massive chalk stone near Malmo in southern Sweden, which is 3 miles long, 1,000 feet wide, and from 100 to 200 feet in thickness, and which has been transported an indefinite distance from an unknown spot. It is quarried for commercial purposes. A similar transported slab of chalk is found on the eastern coast of England, upon which a village had unwittingly been built. In innumerable places on the surface of the earth, as well as on isolated islands in the Atlantic and Pacific and in Antarctica, lie rocks of foreign origin brought afar by some great force. Broken off from their parent mountain ridges and coastal cliffs, they were carried down dale and uphill and over land and sea.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I mean, like, that one that's like miles long, and you know, it's just like, what can carry that kind of enormous block? It breaks it off from a mountain somewhere, and then drags it hundreds of miles.
It has to be like a pretty smooth ride for a rock that big not to break.
Yeah,
Or maybe it was much larger.
yeah.
But I guess if they're not finding like shitloads of other
Strewn,
boulders,
pieces of it strewn everywhere. Yeah, and some of it's chalk. Chalk is very like fragile.
Yeah.
So how do you get an enormous, like, the thing in England that the village is built on top of? That's a huge piece of chalk. That's an enormous, miles and miles, and yet it was carried in one piece somehow. That implies to me
God
that
just dropped it on his sidewalk.
God damn it! I dropped the chalk again. He was drawing stars in the sky and dropped his chalk. So yeah, this book is crazy. There's so much. I went through the part about the crevices. Like, it's difficult to understand what he's talking about. But basically, he goes through all these different geologists who are talking about finding caves full of animal, like where you go in the cave and it's a shallow cave with the roof is real close or whatever. But they find out that it's actually incredibly deep. And the entire floor is hundreds of feet of deposits. But the deposits consist of animal bones and plants and trees and shit that are like broken into tiny fragments.
Yeah.
So none of the skeletons are contiguous. None of them are like what they call articulated. They're not whole where you can see the whole skeleton. It's just little bitty fragments of bones, and it takes them years to they dig all this stuff out of there. And they have this enormous pile of like little bone fragments, and they start putting them together and saying, okay, this is a rhinoceros. This is a bison. This is a tapir. This is a frickin' like a Bengal tiger. And there's thousands and thousands of these animals, and there's 2 different kinds of these deposits. One is like what I was just saying, where it's just fragmentary, right? And then there's another kind where, and the fragments all show this. There's no teeth marks on the fragments, but they're heavily pitted and beat up. Right?
Yeah.
And then there's another kind where the bones are all broken and shit like that, but they're very well preserved and undamaged, other than the breaks. And the geologist that he doesn't pose any of his theories in this. He just is basically quoting over and over and over from books of geology and journals of geology. And so the geologists are theorizing that in the kind where they find all these fragments where the bones are all beat up and like splintered, those were carried there. Those were animals and shit that were already broken up inside of an enormous wave, carried there and pushed into the cave and deposited there like that.
Yeah.
And the ones where the bones are broken but they're otherwise well preserved and not damaged, all the animals were in the cave trying to escape the cataclysm, and the water comes in and bam, just kills them all. Slams them against the rocks, breaks their bones inside their bodies. So the bones are broken, but they're not pitted and damaged and scratched and shit by, so.
It kind of makes sense, though, that you would have these deposits that were just full of all of this organic shit because, we've got all this bedrock, right, way down underneath shit. But say a long time ago, or in an area where, like, after a cataclysm, there's like the bedrock, and then there's just a little layer of mud and silt and stuff on top.
Yeah.
And then you have, plant life starts to grow there, and then animals come. And over thousands of years or whatever, it's building up like all this organic, bed of basically compost and some silt and whatever. And then you end up with like huge trees and all these animals and all of the animals coming in, and as the environment changes, there's all these different types of animals that will come and then die out, or they're there for hundreds of years, and so shitloads of them die there. Mm-hmm. And then the system changes a little bit, the climate changes or whatever, not due to cars, but anyway, so like you have grasslands and you have all these grazers and all of them dying, and then you have lions and all that, everything that feeds on the grazers and everything, and then big trees start growing and the grazers are now gone, and then you have all these birds and all this other shit that come in. But still, you started out with a thin layer of like silty mud on top of bedrock.
Right.
So it's just a slow buildup of animal matter and plant matter.
And it's stratigraphic.
Yeah, and then you have a cataclysm or some like massive piece of ice rolls by, and it just scrapes up all that shit in front of it.
Yeah.
And then, so you've got this big, like the wall, the berm you were talking about in front of the glacier. And then behind the glacier, something catastrophic happens, and all this water comes down and just starts shoving all of that shit into every nook and cranny.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense too. I hadn't thought of that. I wonder about fossils forming in regular ground, because you normally you've got this topsoil and it's it's heavily organic, so nothing.
Yeah, so things keep breaking down, bones keep breaking down.
So you end up with like this organic soil that has traces of plants and animals in it, but they're not fossilized, they're not preserved.
Right.
But yeah, that what's crazy about this is that everything is preserved, like all the small tissues and everything. Like you find these bones or whatever, but they're preserved in all parts, even the hairs and the lip. They talk about the lips and pieces of eyeballs and stuff is all perfectly preserved, and the eyeballs are the first to completely degrade. They're really they go quickly. But when they're totally preserved in this stuff, it's like it indicates that the animals were all alive when they died. Like you guys were making fun of me saying last time. Yeah. They were all alive when they died.
They were all alive when the cataclysm happened.
Right. And they were
wherever they lived, there must have been shitloads of dead ones.
Yes.
As well.
Right.
So you'll have a mixture of both.
Yeah.
And then also if there's like a cataclysm taking place, then you have, say, like these goats and shit that live way up in the high mountains, where it's all snowy and shit, and then down in the valley it's a totally different climate.
Yeah, you got rhinoceroses and stuff like that. Yeah,
and so they all start running towards in the same direction away from, and they like you talked about before, how they'll be cool with each other. Yeah, but also they know shit. Like they know when something's going wrong somewhere. Like all the cows in the field lay down, and we're like, what are they doing that for? 2 hours later, we're like, bam, they get nailed.
Yeah. Yeah, this is an example. Buckland was one of the great authorities on geology of the first half of the 19th century. In a cave in Kirkdale in Yorkshire, so this is in the UK, 80 feet above the valley, he found under a floor covering of stalagmites. Okay, so the stalagmites growing on top of this shit, right? The cave spikes. Under a floor covering of stalagmites, he found teeth and bones of elephants, rhinoceroses, hippopotami, horses, deers, tiger, the teeth of which were larger than those of the largest lion or Bengal, bears, wolves, hyenas, foxes, hares, rabbits, as well as bones of ravens, pigeons, larks, snipe, and ducks. Many of the animals had died before the first set or milk teeth had been shed, so they were young. They were healthy. Certain scholars prior to Buckland had their own explanation for the provenance of elephant bones in the soil of England, and to them Buckland referred the idea which long prevailed and was considered satisfactory by the antiquaries or archaeologists of the last century was that they were the remains of elephants imported by the Roman armies.
Therefore, Romans.
That's right. Special pleading. This idea is also refuted, first, by the anatomical fact of their belonging to an extinct species of the genus. Second, by their being usually accompanied by the bones of rhinoceroses and hippopotamuses, animals which could never have been attached to Roman armies. Thirdly, by their being found dispersed over Siberia and North America in equal or even greater abundance than in those parts of Europe which were subjected to the Roman power. It appeared that hippopotamus and reindeer and bison lived side by side at Kirkdale. Hippopotamus, reindeer, and mammoth pastured together at Brentford near London. Reindeer and grizzly bear lived with the hippopotamus at Sen.
Wait. This is hippopotamus or hippopotamus?
Yeah, sorry, hippopotamus.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. He's like a British guy and they spell it different?
No, I'm just saying
Hippopotamus.
It wrong. Hippopotamus. So lemming and reindeer.
Hippopotamus. My lyrics are bottomless.
So are these caves with these bones.
Continue.
Lemming and reindeer bones found together with cave lion and hyena in Somerset. Hippopotamus, bison, musk sheep found together with worked flint in the gravels of the Thames Valley. So there's, and a lot of these are found underneath, like, existing stalagmites. So
right.
So below the rock of the cave that's been deposited since however many thousands of years, they found these enormous fossil deposits of all these.
All right, so we got to talk about stalactites and stalagmites now.
Okay.
Is there dating based on uniformitarian ideas?
Yeah. They have, you look at whatever kind of stalagmite or tite it is, and they have these ideas of how long that particular kind takes to form, and it's also based on
They also like cut them open and like see the crystal formation.
Right, but the idea of...
Do they even go to physicists? I mean, do they even physicists, bro?
Even physicists, bro?
The physicists are like, oh yeah, this crystal can form very quickly.
Yeah.
Don't talk to the physicist. I mean, look, I've had this shower head, for a couple of years, and it starts forming stalactites.
Yeah.
And if I don't clean my shower, it starts forming stalagmites.
That's right. Beneath the stalactites. Yeah. Well, the problem with that is that, I mean, you can count the rings of a mite or tite, right? You can count the rings, but the rings tell you what? Like, what do they tell you? It's not like tree rings.
It's kind of like, well, I don't know.
I mean,
whenever I've broken a stalactite, they look like, not really like rings, but more like there's a center point, and then there's like the crystals growing out away from the center point toward the edge.
That's okay. So that's a particular kind of growth, but like the kind where it's basically like limestone, is dripping down and it just deposits it in drips.
Yeah.
So the idea is that there's seasonal water.
Right.
So you end up with rings that are supposedly linked to the seasons of the outdoors.
So you can count.
So you supposedly can count, but the amount, it varies, obviously. Like, you don't know if the cave dried up for fucking 100 years, and no rings were deposited, and then,
Then there would be a ring of dust.
It'd be washed off by the water when it started dripping again. So
not if someone was cooking it. If someone was frying like French fries and shit
and bat wings.
So that's another thing. Like, I'm sorry, I'm derailing.
It's all right.
It's like derail day.
No, that's cool
for me, but
it's tangent for us.
Some of the Indian mounds inside these caves, like these, I say these, just in caves,
right,
are like, some of them are like the midden is like 20 feet deep.
Right, and you're talking about mounds as in midden, not the mounds we talked about looking for
not
giants.
burial mounds,
right.
but like refuse mounds, basically. There'll be like an overhang, and like you were saying, you can crawl in there, and you may have enough room to like try to crouch, but really you got to be on all fours.
Yeah,
and it's midden. So like, who was cooking on all fours?
Right
in there.
Why? Yeah. That is a good question. Like,
but then if you dig down, the midden goes down 20 feet down, And then it's like, okay, yeah, now you can see that like
Right.
people were standing under here, like,
Yeah, this is a great big cave. This is badass. And then, like,
it's like, let's throw our trash here so that we keep getting shorter and shorter and shorter.
that's why they became little people.
It just doesn't make any sense. Like,
Yeah,
I've crawled through one, and it's like there's arrowheads laying on the top of it. And I'm just like, what were they doing in here?
Yeah, where it's like, where you have to be on all fours just to get in there.
Yeah.
Why would
I mean,
you?
you can kind of like get on your feet, but you're like crouched down. Like,
Yeah,
you can't really get around.
the ceiling came down.
The floor came up. Man.
The floor came up. The whole mound was picked up and stuff was deposited underneath it, and then it was put back down.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't.
It's
Yeah,
just
or
weird.
or I mean, is it possible that the mound was moved there by water, pushed into that back part of the cave?
Maybe
It would. It seems like it would kind of.
it wouldn't. Well,
It
I
wouldn't
don't
retain
know.
its shape and stuff.
Yeah, maybe I'm remembering it ceiling too low.
But even so, like it's still. I mean, like even if it wasn't, even if you could kind of walk upright, but you had to. It still
You
seems.
can't even walk upright. I know you can't walk upright. I was like 13.
Yeah.
And I was having to crouch.
That's
to
what it
get
is.
in
They were
there.
little people. It's
Yeah.
not real. They weren't Indians.
Anyway, okay, moving on from cave deposits, offshoot, tangent.
No, that's very interesting. Any kind of mystery like that, I love. Like that's a great question. You know, maybe it'd be cool. Like one of these days, if a Native American starts listening to the show, and then we could be like, dude, we got so many questions.
Yeah, why?
Why everything?
That's another thing that blows me away about the Midden mounds is that they're just full of badass, perfect freaking arrowheads. Like that's why people dig in them.
Right. You're like,
So-
well, I thought this was trash.
Yeah, it's supposedly a trash. And so I've imagined like, okay, they're all sitting around the fire. You know, it's dark.
Yeah.
They're making their arrowheads. And then some crazy shit happens. They're like, go!
Oh, yeah.
And they all get up and like either fight or, you know, some massive storm comes and they bail
Yeah.
to the, you know, to their haven somewhere. And then a flood comes in and just like screws everything up. And so they come back, you know, a couple of days later and they can't find their tools. They've been.
Or they
buried.
don't ever come back.
Or they never come back.
It's like the like.
But then somebody comes back. That's the thing. Eventually somebody comes back and then they're like, hey, look at this great cooking spot. And they start cooking on it
Yeah.
and they make different arrowheads.
Right,
1,000
okay.
years later.
I'm thinking of like the top layer. There's badass arrowheads. Like
Yeah, there's badass arrowheads on the top layer, which you could suggest, like say, have been there's been some erosion, and so you're finding,
Okay.
you know, because in the
But still, the question is, why are the badass arrowheads in the trash pile?
yeah, that's what I was saying. Like
Yeah.
maybe they're running away multiple times, but
Yeah.
you get on one layer and you're finding all of these arrowheads in this layer that are all, you know, there's a bunch of them dated to basically the same era, same time.
Right.
And then if you go
The
another
same
foot,
kind and everything. Yeah.
yeah, if you go another foot deep, there are a bunch of different ones.
Right. Yeah. You go from the Tulsa pieces down to the Folsom or whatever.
Yeah, and you keep going, like, you know, 20 foot down, you start finding, you know, the oldest,
Yeah.
the Paleolithic shit.
Right. Yeah. The pre-Holocene stuff.
But
From the
it's
Pleistocene.
like, so on the one hand, it makes sense that like this was a badass place to live,
Yeah.
right? But then occasionally it wasn't,
Right.
and so everyone ran,
That's right.
and then never came back. But you might find in a layer, you know, 6 to 8 inches deep, you're finding a bunch of the same arrowheads, so that the same people were like leaving tools, and those tools kind of got buried, and they didn't find them, and they kept cooking there and more refuse and just kept piling it up, and then they
Yeah.
would leave again and leave some more tools. Perfect ones.
I guess that implies that they had so many arrowheads that they didn't have to dig for them very much. Like you didn't, or maybe the refuse was hot, you know, or something. I don't know if it was a fire. You can't. I mean, digging through it. If the fire, because they would keep it going all year. I mean, I don't know. I'm just
Yeah,
pie in the
But
sky.
it's just it's weird that there's I guess that's a good point. They just had so many that it wasn't that important. But it seems like some of the pieces that are found are like so freaking amazing. It's like if you just made that and it's perfect. There's
Yeah.
like nothing broken. No,
Not that we can
it's
see.
like
They looked at it
perfect.
and they were like, throw it down. Piece of
yeah. But
shit.
I mean, you can
Amateurs.
compare it. You can compare it to ones found with like burials and stuff where they intentionally and they're the same quality.
Right.
Of course,
cheap.
there's burial quality, which is like better.
Right.
But Maybe you're right. I don't know.
I don't know, dude. I'm like it kind of reminds me of the tired stones that we see all over the world, where basically like these people were doing these enormous megalithic and they just dropped all the blocks and then never came back.
Yeah, the thing about the midden that just
is that they did come back.
They came back over and over and over and over, and then but over and over they just dropped everything and left too.
Yeah.
It's like so.
Well, they came back and they found those points from the earlier culture, and they're like, well, these won't work with my arrows. There's no flute and whatever, and just like screw that.
Yeah, and
thing.
there are many cases of where you would find a piece that was obviously edited by a later culture. So like they found this and then they turned it into a drill by like just taking the edges down off of this massive
right,
spearhead.
those long, narrow paleo points, and they turn it into a drill or whatever.
Yeah, because it was like a badass piece of stone that they were like, oh shit, but they didn't need, maybe it was broken or chipped, and so they just worked it into something they could use. But it's like they weren't like, dude, we should dig in this mound and like,
well, we just find some arrowheads, bro. Well, we kind of do that too. We find arrowheads and turn them into iPhones by selling them. Right? You sell it, and you go buy an iPhone.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I guess if you like, if it was like there was some cataclysm or whatever, and you were like cruising around and you find this house, or not a cataclysm, but maybe a war, you like go into the house and you're like, oh yeah, this is a pretty badass place to live. And there's like some flip phones in there, and you're like,
yeah,
what is this?
This is crap. Brett says that putting badass arrowheads, this is how you get future people to dig through your trash. By leaving badass arrowheads in there.
That's a good idea. That's how you become an out-of-place artifact.
He says, I would totally set that up so that future archaeologists dig through all my trash or like a latrine. Dig a latrine and like shit there your entire life, but throw artifacts in there every once in a while. So
but that's actually, that happens. So
yeah,
like we've got these outhouses or whatever, and people will dig through them. They're like really old.
Yeah, because people drop coins.
Yeah, they're like somebody stole some shit, and they're like, oh no, and they run into the outhouse and just like throw it in there.
Yeah.
Or when they're pulling down their britches, it falls out.
Yep.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
No.
Dive in.
Yeah, you just like, nope.
Dive straight in.
Not going in there to get that gun.
Right, but then somebody, after everything dries out and you come along and find it, it's like gold inlaid filigree.
Yeah,
It's like, holy shit, this badass flintlock. It's worth thousands of dollars now. Yeah, or ancient coins.
Yep.
So, that's a good point. This is a good way to become an out-of-place artifact. Dive into a latrine.
Dive into a latrine and strike a pose.
So they find you in the Yeah, have you heard of the bog bodies? Yeah, like we saw some of them at the
Witty.
right, the what was it called? The Mummies of the World tour.
Yeah. Witty Museum in San Antonio.
Those are all murders. The bog
Come
bodies.
on. You can't make an outrageous claim like that.
All the ones we found they were murdered. I mean,
What if it was suicide?
well, it's usually like they're what is it called? A garrote or whatever, where they
Oh yeah.
where it's like they wrap the cord around their necks and then they keep twisting it. Mm-hmm. You can't. I don't think you can do that to yourself. Maybe you can. And then dive headfirst into the bog.
Yeah.
Some of them may be suicides, but the vast majority of them have some kind of damage that appears to have been like they were, blunt force trauma to the back of the head, strangled by rope, and they're just thrown in there. And that's kind of like it's sort of, I don't know why I thought, I guess because we're talking about diving into latrines. I'm thinking these mummified bodies down in these bogs. That's what you would look like. You would end up being a bog body, but you'd be like a shit body or something like that.
Right. Yeah, that was an epic derail. All right, we got to take another break.
There is no such thing as a derail on this. Like everything we talk about is on top.
I'm only saying it because you say it. Derailed.
Derailed. Massive. Yeah, no survivors. 150 casualties.
I just knocked your snake body out of that cart rut.
That's right. We're going to take a break. We'll come back for the second half of the show. Snakes. Shit snakes. welcome back to the second half of the show, Brothers of the Serpent podcast. Me, Russ Allen, and my brother Kyle.
What's up?
Here in the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science. Half our pyramids tied behind our back just to make it square.
Damn right.
And before the show, we were having a conversation about not a square.
Triangles.
That's right, triangles.
Giant triangles.
So we were talking about the Bermuda Triangle because some questions have come up recently about it, and it's a fascinating topic. The first thing I would say about it, really, to people that ask me about it that don't know anything, the first thing I say is like, okay, there are. You have to first realize that the Bermuda area, the area that they call the Bermuda Triangle, is like one of the most heavily traveled
Routes.
Right, yeah, ocean place, like over ocean, so it's like, over the water. It's like one of the most heavily traveled places in the world. So it has a lot of traffic. So one of the things you'll see on the internet, if you look up Bermuda Triangle or Bermuda Triangle Mystery or whatever, you'll see all this skirp derping by skirptards, and they'll say things like, once you correct for the traffic, that the triangle has no more, accidents or accident reports or whatever than any other place. Any other ocean place in the world, which is true. That's absolutely correct. That corrected for traffic levels of traffic, the incidence of reported accidents or of reports of basically like
In a ratio to the traffic is not.
Yeah, well, you have to correct it like
higher.
you do like when you do things when you're looking at like number of deaths in a city, or whatever you have to do by population per square mile or whatever, right? So they do this by number of like amount of traffic per day or whatever. So you correct for that, and you find out that that the Bermuda Triangle doesn't have any more accidents than any other place. But that's not what is the mystery about it.
Slightly misleading.
I call it incredibly disingenuous. I think it's very misleading because it's true, but that's not what the mystery is. The mystery is that the Bermuda Triangle has a very large percentage of its accidents are ships and planes that disappear without a fucking trace.
Yeah, they're anomalous.
That's right.
Accidents. It's like if you're comparing a highway that's full of traffic and a highway that's not very full of traffic, and there's more wrecks on a highway full of traffic, but or accidents, but the cars were like vanishing.
Right.
As opposed to the accidents on the less populated thing, which was vehicles running into each other or just burning up.
Right. Like you look at the highway that has a little amount of traffic, and you find out once you correct for flow, with traffic flow, that the amount of accidents isn't anomalous. But then on the place with lots of traffic, like 2 or 3% of the vehicles involved in accidents just fucking disappear, including with all the people in them and everything on them, and are never found. That is what makes the Bermuda Triangle mysterious. And then sometimes,
especially when they're on their cell phone and they're like, "We're about to pull up to your driveway," and then they just never are seen again.
Or you look out your window and you see them pulling in, and you look away, you do something, you look back up, and they're fucking gone, and you never find them, or their car, or whatever, or if some vehicles are involved in accidents or they just disappear, and then 10 years later you find that car on the side of the road, empty.
Right.
Undamaged. The key's still in the ignition, but the doors are locked and nobody's in it.
Yeah.
It's like that's literally. I mean, it sounds like an exaggeration, but that is literally the case of many of these. There's the most recent book on this subject was done by a guy with a very interesting name. His name is Gian Quasar, which is like the most badass name ever.
You just occasionally just like busts out with a book.
That's right. And it blows everybody's minds within like hundreds of millions of miles. Right.
It's not a Harry Potter name or anything like that.
Yeah, no. It's the brightest book in of that year. So he released this book, and he actually his is the first Bermuda Triangle book that was released where the internet was like. He released it in the I think early 2000s, late 90s. Okay, so like it was he had the power of the internet. All the earlier books were like sort of pre-Google, pre-web, or whatever. So his book was done with the power of the internet, and he used it to do a lot of searches. And then he ended up diving completely into the Coast Guard records. Okay, and the Coast Guard, they keep records of everything, but nobody. It's a giant bureaucracy, so nobody in the bureaucracy really knows what's in there. And like, it's unlike missing persons reports; they're not obligated to like report because it's not really they keep records or whatever because they're the Coast Guard, but they're not obligated to put this up on web pages or whatever.
Right.
So he dives down into their records and he finds this enormous. He's just looking for Bermuda stuff, and he's reading through, and kind of like David Paulides, he's reading through a bunch that are non-anomalous. Right. This ship is like not it doesn't show up to port when they thought it was going to, and then like he finds out way later that it actually showed up in a different port and everything's fine. It's not a big deal. So he went through a bunch of those, but he found enormous numbers of anomalous disappearances of planes and ships.
Yeah, they showed up to a different port because like they all fell asleep for like 18 hours, and then when they woke up, the compasses were spinning and all this weird shit. But they made it.
Yeah, they didn't disappear, and there was no accident, so everything's
totally
fine. One of them was turned inside out, but he was still there. So
and they had the wrong cargo when they got there.
that's right. The ship was named different, but it was fine. So he found a bunch of stuff like that, but he found whole huge lists of disappearances and strange occurrences that no one previously had known about because nobody had the internet or dived into the Coast Guard records, right?
Yeah.
And the Coast Guard itself isn't really aware of what's in its records because again, they're a giant bureaucracy and they don't do that kind of stuff.
And thank God for Al Gore. We wouldn't know any of this shit. Damn. Just got to give that guy credit, man.
Yeah, gotta give him credit. But the internet's warming the world. It's causing global warming.
Oh my God.
All those wires, all that data.
What a great and terrible invention.
So his book is really good. It's called Into the Bermuda Triangle. If you get it, you can get it on Kindle. It's riveting, really. No pun intended for rivets, right? And I don't have on hand. I mean, I have the book in my phone, but I'm not going to read a bunch of cases. But I can tell you about some.
But maybe we will, like on another show.
Yeah,
that would be cool.
I can go through and sort of flag them. But there are some that I remember, like the Star Tiger plane. Okay, it was called the Star Tiger. It was a small, like a 4-prop engine. Okay, it was coming in for a landing, and the air traffic control guy. And this happens numerous times. There are many reports of this, but this is like one of the most obviously blatantly anomalous ones. Okay, so the Star Tiger's coming in. They've contacted ATC. It's evening or nighttime. It's like not in the middle of the night, but it's like, it's probably 10 or 11 o'clock or something like that. So it's dark. They're coming in for a landing, and they've already gotten the air traffic controller has given them the heading for the runway that they're coming in towards. He looks out and he can see the plane. Its landing lights are on and everything, and he can see it out there. It's still over water. Okay, the water that it's over it's over about 25 feet deep. It's crystal clear, and it's that way for fucking hundreds of miles around the entire area. Okay, so it's shallow. Relatively shallow water. It's crystal clear. If you're flying over in a plane, you look down and you just see the bottom, and you can barely see the water unless the sun's coming off of it because it's so clear. Okay, so he looks out there and he sees the plane coming in. He looks down. He does a couple of things for a minute. Talks to another plane. He looks up, and the plane's gone, and it's never found.
Was he communicating with him on the radio and stuff?
Yeah, like they called in and asked for permission to land and everything. He calls him. Yeah, so. In other words, the plane is a couple of miles out from the airport.
We are coming in for landing, sir.
Yeah. Roger that, Star Tiger. You can come in at heading 108.
Okay, everything's looking fine here, and passengers are very quiet and asleep. Everything's going fine.
That's right, and then they're gone. That's literally what happened. Like the air traffic control guy looked down for a minute, and when people say I was doing something else for a minute and I came back, the minute is rough. But ATC, they keep track of what they're doing by the second. So he knew exactly how long he was not paying attention to that plane. So he looked back up after roughly 60 seconds. He looks back up, and it is no longer in the sky, no longer in visual. And he immediately calls out like there's some kind of emergency. Like he tries to call them. He's like, Star Tiger, you come back, blah, blah, blah. He doesn't hear anything. So within minutes of its disappearance or whatever happened to it, he calls out a warning, an alert, gets all the authorities, and they send out ships and planes and boats and everything, and they find nothing, and it's never been found. That is what makes the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle. Stuff like that. There's plenty of. He has a whole. So the book is separated into two sections: ships and planes. Okay. The ship ones are very interesting. They're less startling than the airplane ones, because an airplane can, like, a ship goes out and it can be gone for months before it comes back into port somewhere, right? And it's moving slowly, right? You know, and so like you expect to hear from a ship maybe once a week, if that. You know, they'll come and they'll talk to land if they have to, but they don't have to. Once they leave, until they are getting near where they're going to go or whatever, there's no need for a ship to communicate. They don't have to request, you know, they're not like the planes are constantly in contact with ATC. So that wherever they take off from, they're talking to the air traffic control of the place they took off from, and then they'll reach a certain, like, there's all these zones. So they'll cross over to a zone and they'll be handed off by the ATC of this place to the ATC of the next place they're going to, and they keep getting handed off everywhere until they get to where they get landed. So there's constant contact and there's constant updating of where everybody is, so that no one runs into each. You know, there's no mid-air collisions and shit like that. So when a plane disappears without saying anything and without a trace, it's a lot more startling and sudden and immediate than a ship.
Yeah.
Because a ship can go out and, like, no one will, you know, you don't hear from it and you don't expect to hear from it. So a lot of times the discovery that a ship is missing is only when it doesn't come into port when it said it was going to.
Yeah.
And then they have its predicted route, because it was going from here to here. So the first thing they do is they contact ships or planes that are in the area of its route and say, do you see anything? Do you have visual contact with where we expected the blah 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 whatever, the USS da da da, and it hasn't come into port. So they'll start asking people, and if no one sees it anywhere, then sometimes depending on the ship, there'll be a big search for it, and the search is usually put on by either the company that owns it or the insurance company that is insuring it. Mm-hmm. Okay. And they'll get a hold of all the people, the Coast Guard, the military, whatever resources they can get, and they will put out these enormous searches, and they'll search thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of square miles of ocean and not find anything. And they'll, just like the MH-70, the plane, there's nothing floating. You know, when a ship goes down, you expect there to be debris.
Yeah.
So a lot of times there's no debris. Sometimes there is debris, and that makes it even stranger, like more strange. Like there are ones that he talks about where a ship goes missing, and they can't find it. They search for weeks and they don't find anything. And then months and months later, they do find the ship, and it's like listing 20 degrees to port, right? So it's tilted way over. It's completely empty of people, but there were two pets that were on board. Like there's a dog and there's a bird or whatever. They're there. They're starving to death. They're still alive, barely, you know. But the people are all gone. There's no signs of any kind of struggle. All the cargo is still in the hold. All of the what are they called? The boats.
The lifeboats.
The lifeboats are still there. Or in one case, there was a single lifeboat on the boat. The boat was like a yacht. It had a single lifeboat mooring, and the lifeboat was gone. But the lifeboat wasn't put down. The lifeboat, the mooring itself of the lifeboat looked like something had ripped the lifeboat physically off the ship by great force. Right, so all the places where it was bolted in were like all bent, and everything was like torn, and all the metal was ripped, and the lifeboat was completely gone. But it hadn't been let down into the water. But
sounds like some kind of Johnson tried to let the lifeboat down and just screwed it up.
God damn it, Johnson!
You've doomed us all, Johnson. Grab the life jackets.
You've doomed us all again, Johnson. But yeah, so they don't find any life jackets, or they do like a life jacket is eventually found, but it's you know, it's thousands of miles away from where the ship was supposed to be. There was one really strange one where a ship went missing, and it was a small yacht, so it was a 2-person yacht. It was a husband and wife that were on the boat. It was missing, and those are even more sort of fuzzy, because like when it's just a personal boat, you don't have to tell anybody what you're doing. You just get in your fucking boat and you go, and then you come back, right? Your marina may know that you're leaving because you called ahead to request, put the boat in the water, I'm going to be there if it's a big enough boat, right? But anyway, so they start to figure out that they're missing by this long chain of like, so their family, if they have like relatives on land, they're like they start to wonder where the hell they are, and then eventually
kind of like missing persons cases.
It can be with missing, but then but this takes an extra step of like, they didn't go into a national park, they drove their car, and they eventually find the car parked at the marina, and they're like, oh, they took the boat, fuck.
Yeah.
Then you call the Coast Guard, and it's been months at this point, right? Or weeks or whatever. So you call the Coast Guard and you say, hey, like, we don't know. And nobody knows where they went. They just got in the boat and went out to sea, right? So there was this one case where that was basically the case, and nobody knew where they were. Well, alongside of that, when people were starting to figure out that these people were missing, there were also people coming in and reporting, like, hey, we saw this boat, like, floating nearby this island out there, and it kind of something looked weird. It was off. And you see this kind of in the reports where the people who are reporting things in, you can kind of tell that they saw more than they will tell. They'll say, I think it was something was strange. And you get the idea that they know what was fucking strange. They're just not saying. Right? For whatever reason. Maybe they boarded the boat because they were looking for loot. And then they saw craziness and they're like, oh, fuck. And then they got off the boat and they didn't want to say, yeah, so I was going to, like, steal, but I saw dead bodies. So they just say, I think something was strange. So there's those kind of reports. And so that's what the guy reported, that he saw a boat and he named the yacht. He gave the name of it. And this is where people connected. Okay, that's the yacht of these people that are reported missing by their family members. And this guy said that that the dinghy was out, the little lifeboat thing. It was out, but it was still attached by a rope to the main yacht. But he said that it looked like there was a person in the dinghy, but he was, like, hanging over the side.
Oh, shit.
Okay, so, like, what the fuck? So, like, and this was, I think it was near Costa Rica or something like that. But the authorities didn't go out there to look at it for whatever reason.
Puerto Rico?
It could have been Puerto Rico, yeah. Yeah, Puerto Rico probably is what it was. So they did, for whatever reason, the authorities took days to go out there after this report was made. Another person on a private yacht saw it again, and he actually pulled, because at this point it was going out of the radio, like, keep an eye out if you see anything. So he kind of pulled in and he said, yeah, there's, like, a dead man on that dinghy. His whole upper body is, like, hanging over the side of it into the water, and his lower half is covered in a blue tarp or something, is what he was saying. And the boat itself is just drifting. It's kind of nearby this island. There's no anchor down, and everything's drifting or whatever. And then, so the authorities of the place, if it was Puerto Rico or whatever, they eventually get out there the next day. They find all that, but the dinghy now is empty. But they see all the blood, right? But somebody's taken the body. And then they get on the boat itself.
Shark.
Yeah. They get on the boat itself and they find bullet holes, right? But the bullet holes are, like, fresh, like they were just made. And the boat has been known to be floating out there for, like, 3 or 4 days at least, So there's weird stuff like that. So the idea there is, like, some piracy, right? Some kind of piracy happened. But there were other people on the boat that were just never found.
Yeah.
The guy, and it was never confirmed who the person was who was dead in the dinghy, because, like, obviously his body was gone, and whether he was even male. Anyway, that was a weird one, but there are ones where the boats disappear and the lifeboat will show up years later on some remote island in the Antarctic. Like, that was a crazy one, And the only reason that was found out was because some scientific expedition had gone to this island specifically. It's down in the Arctic, like the Antarctic Circle. They had gone there to something specific about this island was weird scientifically. They went there and they had expedition photographs, and somebody was looking through them and they saw, like, what's this boat? There's a wooden boat, like, in this little bitty cove on this weird island, and the scientists don't even mention it, but the guy was able to discern the name on the side of the boat was the name of this freaking ship that had gone missing on the other side of the world in the Bermuda Triangle, like, freaking 10 years before.
Dude, that's nuts.
And then there was another scientist, so he got interested in that. There's another scientific expedition that shows up on that same island a couple of months later. So there's, like, the Russians win and then the Americans win or whatever. When the Americans get there, whoever the second expedition was, the boat was gone, no longer in the cove. But they find, like, stuff laid out on the beach, like coils of copper and other very strange shit. And, it's just like, you're like, what the fuck is going on? How did this get all the way over here on the other side of the planet? But the plane, like I said, the airplane disappearances are the ones that really capture people because they're so sudden. And like I said, they're in constant contact. So when a plane goes down, like, and everybody knows the Flight 19 story, how those guys were, and you have to remember about the Flight 19. They didn't have, only the lead guy had a radio. None of the other people, none of the other pilots were able to communicate back to I think that's right. I know they didn't have instruments. They had compasses and that's it. Right? So they didn't have radar. They didn't have any of that stuff. and they're flying in formation, and they start to talk about how they don't know where they are, and they seem to think that they need to go the wrong direction. Like everybody thinks that they needed to turn and go west to get back to the coast of Florida, but they seem to think that they needed to go to the right, which everybody thought would take them out over the Atlantic, right? And they were completely lost. And then of course the search plane that goes off after them, it also vanishes without a trace.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, that's not weird. That plane was just unreliable. I'm like, it's fucking weird. Okay. And what else is really strange about Flight 19 is like, not too long ago, like fairly recently, they found 5 of those exact planes of Flight 19, like laying on the floor of the Atlantic near the coast of Florida, and it wasn't Flight 19.
Don't drink the water.
It was a completely different flight of 5 planes that had somehow vanished.
Holy shit.
I mean, when they found it, they were ecstatic. They thought, we've solved Flight 19 mystery. They get all the numbers of the planes. Nope, not Flight 19. It's a different one that no one even talks about, that also apparently vanished over the Atlantic, just like Flight 19 did. But for some reason, its story is not known. Nobody knows who was in those planes.
Holy shit, that's crazy, man.
Yeah. So,
So give the details of Flight 19, because I remember, I think I watched it on Ancient Alien or
yeah,
some shit like that.
it's on H, and I'll probably get some of them wrong, but the basic idea is that they were a training flight that was taking off from an Air Force base in Florida, and it was, I don't think it was during World War II, but it was like right in that period. It was like maybe right after it. So this was before planes had all the instrumentation that they very shortly were able to get. Okay. Oh wow, this gigantic block of text that Brett just gave us. Yeah, the planes were called the Avenger. You scroll upwards. Flight 19 undertook a routine navigation and combat training exercise. The assignment was called Navigation Problem Number 1. Okay, it was a simple navigation. So a combination of bombing and navigation which other flights had completed or were scheduled to undertake that day. The flight leader was United States Navy Lieutenant Charles Harold Taylor, who had about 2,500 flying hours, mostly in aircraft of this type, while his trainee pilots each had 300 hours total, and 60 flight hours in the Avenger. Taylor had completed a combat tour in the Pacific Theater as a torpedo bomber pilot on the aircraft carrier USS Hancock, and had recently arrived from NAS Miami, where he had also been a VTB instructor. The student pilots had recently completed other training missions in the area where the flight was to take place. They were U.S. Marine Captains Edward Joseph Powers and George William Stivers, U.S. Marine Second Lieutenant Forrest James Gerber, and U.S.N. Ensign Joseph Tipton Bossy. Their call signs were started with Fox Terror. The aircraft were 4 TBM-1Cs. There's a bunch of numbers here. I'm not going to read all that off. Each was fully fueled, and during pre-flight checks, it was discovered they were all missing clocks. Navigation of the route was intended to teach dead reckoning principles, which involved calculating, among other things, elapsed time. The apparent lack of timekeeping equipment was not a cause for concern, as it was assumed each man had his own watch. Take your own fucking watch and radar when you go fly. Takeoff was scheduled for 13:45 local time, but the late arrival of Taylor delayed departure until 14:10. Weather at NAS Fort Lauderdale was described as favorable, sea state moderate to rough. Taylor was supervising the mission, and a trainee pilot had the role of leader out front. Called Naval Air Station, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, navigation problem number 1. Yeah, so it was they were basically going to fly a box. They take off, they fly, and they turn, they fly, they turn again, they fly, and then they come back home. Right, it's basically, you're flying a kind of a triangle or a square. I think maybe it was a triangle, that's why they call it. The whole idea of the Bermuda Triangle started. But the point is that at some point in their mission, after they had taken either one, I think they had taken 1 or 2 of the turns, that the compass started to spin, and Taylor started to say he didn't know where he was. First, he was complaining about the ocean and the sea being indistinguishable from each other. Like, he thought that the ocean was above him for a little while, and then it looked like he was talking about how he couldn't tell, and that the ocean was all weird and frothy looking. Right, okay. So anybody who's been to the beach, you're familiar with the idea that like there can be mist in the atmosphere, and you can't tell where the ocean begins and the sky begins. You know where, like you can't really figure out where the ocean ends and the sky starts, or the other way around. So people have theorized it was that, but it doesn't. None of that makes any sense. Like whatever the guy was describing was complete visual. It was not a blackout, but it was confusing. Okay, and there was an argument between him and the other pilots, and one of them outranked him, actually. There was a guy who outranked him, but he was below him in flight, but above him in rank. You see what I'm saying? But it was the Marine. He was a captain or something like that. Marine captains that were still, yeah. So there was some kind of strange command issue. Like when Taylor started to not understand what was going on, and then this guy started to try to take command, and he was demanding that they do the opposite of whatever Taylor was saying, right? But everybody had to follow Taylor because according to the military rules, like he's in command even though he's lower rank because he's the leader of this whole exercise. So there was this big bullshit with that or whatever, and like what people think ended up happening is they ran out of fuel. They flew until they ran out of fuel, and they either ditched over water or over land. But their planes have never been found, even though they were almost in constant communication with the ground. Like they were constantly talking to them. Now, I do remember when I was reading about it recently that the radio was going in and out, and then there were some times where they were being picked up by over radio by bases that were hundreds of miles away and not being picked up by Fort Lauderdale, which should have been the closest. So that's one indication that people started to take, like, okay, now we know that atmospheric effects can do weird things to radio waves. You know, like at nighttime you can talk to people in Japan because it bounces off the upper, it bounces off the stratosphere and goes around over the horizon. But, so at Fort Lauderdale, they're hearing Taylor talking. He's like, rah! And then suddenly he's being picked up, at a base that's hundreds of miles away, and they contact Lauderdale, and they're like, hey, we can hear them. But are they supposed to be where we are? And they're like, no, like you're on the other side of the state. And then it would fade out from them, and then Fort Lauderdale would start picking them up again. So it was going in and out like that, and it was a really strange thing. But basically, it gets muddied because people have spent years basically destroying Taylor's character, claiming that he was a drunk, and just they're doing all this bullshit, which to me looks like special pleading in order to explain the mystery. That it wasn't there was nothing mysterious. He was wasted, or he was a dumbass, or he didn't really know what he was doing, even though he had 2,500 flight hours and all this bullshit. And that he made bad choices, and or they just there's all these explanations that kind of muddy the water. So I never like to use Flight 19 as anything but this is what started people looking at the mystery. But to me, it doesn't outline. It's not a good outline of like the kind of anomalous stuff that can, like the Star Tiger thing. It just fucking vanishes right before the airport when there's nothing weird happening, and that to me is a more good indication of the strangeness that happens in the Bermuda Triangle. Now, the theories of what's happening, like we talked about this a little bit, like rogue waves is one. Now, rogue waves, up until very recently, were considered to be bullshit. Like they were skirp-derped by the mainstream, like thinking that they're like rogue waves aren't real. Blah, blah, blah. Well, now they are real. Like we have Google Earth has pictures of rogue waves. Okay. They've seen them on satellite photos, like these enormous waves that are traveling across the ocean. So yeah. Rogue waves do happen, but rogue wave will not take out a plane, right? So maybe it can explain some ship accidents, but not a plane. What's he saying? Official report says the compass has failed. How does that happen? How does a magnet fail?
Well, there are magnetic anomalies. It doesn't really fail. It just
compasses failed.
The compass did exactly what it was supposed to do. Pointed towards
the strongest
magnetic field
nearby. Compass failed. Magnets stopped working, and that's not mysterious.
Yeah, unless they were above 600 degrees Fahrenheit.
But what makes a compass spin? Because that is the most commonly. I mean, like really, when you talk about not just Bermuda Triangle anomalies, but like when MH, is it 370? The number of the plane that the Malaysian Airlines that disappeared was 370, wasn't it?
I don't remember.
I think it was MH370. When it disappeared, this was fascinating to me because Kyle and I were following all these reports or whatever, and of course people are like, throwing out all this bullshit. Oh, it flew this way, like it was taking, the crash of the ocean. But there was this really interesting statement made by an Air Force guy who said, hey, their route took them directly over this area, and I don't remember why. It's somewhere in Indonesia, and he said that's one of the places on the planet where compasses don't work sometimes, and that your instruments all go crazy and your compass spins. Now, so that was reported by Columbus on his way to the Americas. Basically, he goes through the Bermuda Triangle. That's when he sees the weird light come up out of the ocean and go back down. That famous thing. He talks about the compass spinning and freaking out all the sailors. Okay, so what makes a compass not just point the wrong way, not point to not north, but spin?
Well,
geomagnetic tornadoes.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, so if you had a fluctuating magnetic field to the south, it would turn on, somehow like pulsing.
It's pulsing.
That could cause your compass to spin.
It would look like it was spinning, yeah.
I mean, it could spin.
Yeah.
It could actually spin because of the inertia.
It goes turn back to the north, it turns towards it, and you go back to the north. Yeah.
I mean, the inertia of the needle, which is maybe very slight, but still.
Yeah.
If it was timed right, it could cause the compass to spin.
Yeah. So, another, like plenty of people have reported.
Another thing that can cause a compass to spin is relativity. So, like, if you're spinning and the compass is not.
My compass is spinning. No, you're spiraling into the ground. No, my compass is. But that's.
It's like the old pendulum question.
Yeah.
When you're at the North Pole and you.
Is the pendulum turning? Or is it
are
actually
you
still and the planet is spinning beneath it?
Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. When you go to the North Pole, pendulums.
I am a professional. Well, the word around town is I might be going profesh. Skirped.
It is a lucrative profesh.
Yeah. So that's the word. That's what people are saying.
I don't think that you just skirp-derped anything. Those are all legitimate things, except for the pendulum at the North Pole is not valid for compasses.
You know what I'm saying.
But if you're standing directly,
Hey, I can just come up with fucking, and how could there be a fluctuating magnetic field to the south? Well, I can figure that out.
squids spinning.
Well, what I was thinking was lava tubes.
Yeah, could be that.
Could have been fucking massive lava tubes.
Yep. Lava tubes full of salt water flowing fast. Salt water is electrolyte.
That's true.
So, but there are other
It could have been an earthquake underneath the ocean where the bedrock was like a massive fucking crystal.
Yep.
And so the earthquake is getting like rung.
Yeah.
Electricity.
That would be why
causing magnetic fields that are oscillating.
That would make sense because he said that the ocean looked weird and frothy and choppy and strange.
Bam!
Yeah.
Bermuda Triangle solved!
Mystery solved. Next. So this is why some people have speculated on methane bubbles, like gigantic methane bubbles that come up from the ocean sediment, right? So for the billions and billions and billions of years, stuff has been biodegrading in the ocean sediment, and then all of it farts at once, and it releases this enormous methane bubble. And methane doesn't stay as when they did tests on this. They did laboratory tests, releasing methane bubbles in salt water. They saw that the methane bubble does not stay as a big solid bubble. It turns into tiny billions of tiny little bitty ones.
Yeah, frothy.
Yeah, and it basically has the effect of drastically lowering the density of water.
Effervescence.
Stinky effervescence. Yeah. So suddenly the density of water drops massively, and that also massively drops the amount of weight that the water can support. Okay, so if you're a ship and you're over that area, and a methane bubble bursts directly beneath the hull of your ship, and it comes up, all kinds of bad, like it can just basically swallow you whole. Your whole ship just drops down into the water because suddenly the water can't support the ship anymore. So basically, your ship falls to the bottom of the bubble. Okay, it's deep in the water. It's just the water's full of air. So the bubble continues upwards and goes out into the atmosphere, but the water now you're below the water.
Yeah.
So you basically sink instantaneously. Or if the bubble is smaller than your ship and you've got a big ass cargo ship, the bubble can come up in the middle and sort of break the keel, because the ship is suddenly suspended from the front to the back, or it can just come up at the front and you dive down into it or whatever. Okay, so there's a lot of different scenarios that can cause ships to vanish. But the problem with that is that ships are full of things that float. This is my problem with it. Like, I can see methane bubbles, and you have strange stuff does happen. So it could be that even though the ocean is enormous, it could be that a ship just happens to be directly over the spot where an enormous methane bubble gets released just by happen chance. But it's weird that it only happens in the Bermuda Triangle and not really anywhere else.
Yeah.
But that may be because the sediment's strange there because of all the islands or whatever. But in any case, the ship that gets swallowed up in the ocean from the methane bubble should still nevertheless release all kinds of floating shit
Yeah.
that people would find. It would be would cause a debris field. There would be this big floating circle of stuff in the ocean after the
Yeah.
ship was down.
Yeah.
That's not the case. I mean, even planes, when they go down there, planes are full of things that should float.
Yeah.
And in modern times, the one of the bigger mysteries in modern times is like every ship and every plane has transponders that automatically go off. Like no one has to go turn them on. If something happens that where the ship goes down, either the computers recognize that something is going on and turns the transponder on, or if the transponder is like yanked away from its mooring because of some cataclysmic thing that happens, that turns it on. In other words, it has all kinds of ways of being activated. If it gets turned over or turned on its side, it's basically got an altimeter in there. It can tell its attitude. It will turn on, okay? So if it tilts 45 degrees, all that kind of stuff, it'll turn on. So when the ship, a ship goes away and its transponder never comes on.
Yeah, that's odd.
Right. Or a plane goes down and its transponder does come on, but no one can find it. And then the battery dies. How does that happen? Like, they're designed to be found.
I don't know, man. Sometimes when you're dealing with the Bermuda Triangle, things just vanish. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Tangent Triangle of Bermuda. The 10 by 10 by 10 Tangent Triangle.
Your intro almost disappeared right there.
Yeah. I didn't know I didn't know where I was. The ceiling looked like the floor, the walls looked like the floor, and the ceiling and the wall, everything, it all looks the same in this cube. It's all green.
That's right. In the Tangent Cube, things disappear like intros.
I was pretty sure the smoke was falling and the ashes were rising.
That's a volcano. I'm just saying.
Don't worry, folks. Our compasses were spinning, but we know which way is straight to pyramids.
That's right. When you're at the North Pole, you run around in circles, and it will spin. And you just keep following it north, but just keep running around in a circle.
Yeah.
That's right.
When you're at the North Pole, every direction you look is south.
Can only go downhill from there. So, I was trying to go through some of the theories. So we got the rogue wave, we got the methane bubble. Another one is aliens.
Yeah.
That one's difficult to, for me, it's difficult to debunk. Because it could be aliens. But
yeah, I mean, like, the first documented UFO sighting was by Christopher Columbus.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
or at least
I don't know
the
if
first one we have now.
Yeah, it's not, there's...
In the Bermuda Triangle.
Right. Maybe it is the first one. I know there's all those Renaissance, or there's those...
It's an old one.
The tapestries that have UFOs in them.
I just mean it by a person like reporting a sighting
Right.
in the Bermuda Triangle. That's
And
as far as I know. That's the earliest.
He didn't.
one we have.
It's more like a UFO in the sense that he didn't call it God or anything like that people did before that. He just said it was a weird light that came out of the ocean and then went back down.
It flew,
Yeah.
and you couldn't identify it.
Yeah. It was unidentified.
But it might not have been an object.
Flying object. It was a USO, unidentified, or underwater, something like that. Unidentified submarine object. That's it. That's how it goes. USO.
But it came out of the water and then went back down.
Yeah. And his compasses were spinning at the time.
Yeah, that's
Freaked
weird.
the crew out, and they were never seen again.
picture it didn't happen.
That's not fair. I have this nice painting. Yeah, he did report that. Have you? By the way, have you
Carbon scribbles, or it didn't happen.
Have you ever heard of the wheels of the ocean?
No.
Okay, this is connected to the Bermuda Triangle in a sense, but in ship's logs throughout the ages, there have been reported wheels. Okay, so they would call them wagon wheels or whatever. So like the ship is going along, and in the water beneath the ship or around it or near it or whatever, they see this light formation that looks like a wagon wheel. So it's a big circle, and it's got a central hub and has spokes going out, and they'll rotate under the water. There'll be many colors in the lake. So they're going along at night, and the night watchman, the guy up in the crow's nest or whatever, who's looking out for icebergs and shit and rocks, will call down this because he sees this enormous wheel under the waves.
That's badass.
Yeah, and that's been those reports have been for as far back as you can find ship records, all the way up to the present time. Did we ever mention the pilots that were over the North Pacific that took pictures of the crazy lights in the water below them?
Oh, I probably in passing, but that was fucking crazy, dude.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, these guys were cargo pilots. So they were flying a huge 747 cargo plane or whatever, and it was in the middle of the night over the North Pacific. So they're up there by Alaska or whatever. But they're over open ocean, and there's nothing down there, and it's pitch black. But then they say that they started to see this light. The ocean started to look like a reddish color, and it was sort of glowing. And then they saw this enormous column of light go up to the sky, and then there were all these lights down in the water. Now they're at cruising altitude, which is 33, 34, 36,000 feet.
Yeah.
For that kind of plane. They took some photos. One of the pilots, I think the co-pilot was a hobbyist, a photographer. So he had these badass digital cameras with him on the plane, and he was able to kind of like out the window of the cockpit take pictures. And there's two that were posted with the news stories, and I've got them, and they're just
Yeah, I remember seeing them. They're
it's
fucking crazy looking.
Right. And the first thing you have to realize is that they're 30,000 feet, and these light formations that are down in the water must be enormous.
Yeah.
I mean, they're bigger than the. I mean, not the lights themselves, but the area that they cover is like. I mean, how much of land can you see? If you're up that high and you're looking down and that was land, how much do you think it would be? Like the entire state of Texas? Like, it's a huge area, right?
Yeah. I don't know. It's huge.
But yeah, there's these huge spots of light, and they're all multicolored. There's reds, yellows, greens, purples, blues. Okay. And they're these big circles of light, and they're all kind of gathered together like in a big, like a group. There's just a big group of them. But over the entire ocean, you see this weird reddish haze, right? And then way off at the horizon, you see this strange green, like a fluorescent green color coming off. So they said that according to their eyewitness reports, and they reported this like while they were in the air, and then when they got to the ground, they were showing people the photographs. People were like, "Holy shit!" But they said it lasted about 45 minutes, and then just turned off, like somebody flipped a light switch, and all the lights just disappeared.
And then it was like skirp-derped, like crazy.
Yeah, I mean the things people said, like it's a fishing fleet. Like no, it's not a fishing fleet.
I can just imagine that photographer, like right now, he's somewhere like in a basement, like in a rocking chair, just like with his computer, just like rocking back and forth. He's all fat. And
he's got grease pencil all over the walls, drawing lines between things.
He's like drooling. It's just like, what is the lights? What are the lights?
He's got pictures of pyramids and shit. And
poor guy.
And ancient languages all over the place, trying to solve the problem. like tacks with like red string.
That would be like, seriously, that would be pretty overwhelming to witness that, and just like there's no
right. What do you do with it?
What the fuck was that?
Yeah. I have those pictures. I look at them often because, when I show them to people, I'm trying to stress them. I'm like, you have to realize that this is from 30,000 feet, because they're, when you look at it, you see the sort of the rim of the plane window that he's looking out of, and then you see like this flat expanse and all these lights.
Yeah.
I'm like, he's at 30,000 feet.
Yeah,
That's
they're
like
spread apart by miles, probably.
I mean, they're miles wide themselves. I mean, They're the size of cities, and they cover this enormous area.
It was just
Undersea
the
volcanoes.
bioluminescent, plankton things, phosphorus in
Yep.
the water.
That was one of them. People called it undersea volcanoes. I was like, yeah, those are purple sometimes.
Yeah, and just
Green.
like freaking 20 miles wide. And,
Right, and there was like 500 of them, and then they went out in 45 minutes. That's a great
Yeah.
explanation.
and nobody saw any pumice or anything.
Right.
It's like,
There's no smoke. No. So that.
oh shit. The lights occurred 20 minutes after a vertical lightning bolt down into the ocean.
Right. So okay. So there was people tried to say, now that's what Brett's saying. People tried to say that the shaft of light that the pilots reported seeing, and they reported it coming up from the ocean and going upwards. People tried to say no, it actually came down and it was a bolt of lightning. Or
Everybody know lightning goes up.
they were
You learn
saying
that when you're 10.
they were calling it a sprite. Yeah, you learn that when you're 10. They're calling it a sprite, or what is the other one? Elves. They're the weird names of lightning that happens in the upper atmosphere. The ones that are like red and that you hardly ever see from the ground. They were claiming that they had directly encountered one of those, and it was, I don't know. I mean, it just, the vertical shaft of light they saw, the pilots claimed went upwards. They saw the ocean light up, and then the shaft of light went up into the sky. People later tried to say, no, it came down, and, basically just totally.
Yeah, we all know that when lightning strikes the ocean, the whole thing for miles just lights up with all kinds of rainbow colors.
Right. And it lasts for 45 minutes.
yeah. And then just goes out.
Goes out.
That's-
Stops. St. Elmo's balls.
Yeah. They didn't mention the other 40 lightning bolts that struck around the same time that didn't do that.
Right. Or to explain why there were no lightning bolts in the photographs, or even any storm clouds of any
Oh,
kind.
yeah. I forgot about that.
They were far
Could have been
above.
cosmic rays.
That's what I'm saying. They were 30,000 feet is way above any clouds that cause lightning. That's why they were trying to say it was a
That's a good
sprite
point.
or whatever. Let's see. Okay, so Brett's telling us more stuff. Dutch pilot JPC Van Heijst explained on P-Base how 5 hours into the 10-hour flight, they spotted an intense flash of light like a lightning bolt directly vertically up in the distance. This was then followed by a deep red and orange glow 20 minutes later. Yep. Yeah, so I have some of the pictures. Maybe I could put them in the show notes for you guys to look at. They are, when you try to keep in your mind what you're looking at, it's mind blowing. Literally, it really is, because you're just like, what the hell is this? And no one's even tried, really, aside from armchair skirping, to explain anything. So it's similar to the Bermuda Triangle. I mean, this is the North Pacific, whereas the Bermuda Triangle is like the South Atlantic. But it's similar, and this is why I brought up the wagon wheels, the light wheels that are seen in the ocean. That there are. I would tend to think that probably maybe that the lights that these pilots saw was some kind of natural phenomenon that we just don't understand.
Yeah.
Right. It could be something else. I mean, people did say aliens. This is obviously the alien mothership, and it's taking off.
Yep.
Or
The Bureau is here.
the Bureau is here somehow. It's already in the water.
It's Nibiru's reflection, but Nibiru's cloaked. Wait.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Nobody does.
You can't see a reflection.
You have to hold your thumb up in there.
Hold your thumb down at the lights in the ocean, and you can see the reflection of Nibiru and the shit from the lightning bolt. So, in the book, the into the Bermuda Triangle, he goes all the way back as far as he can in history. That basically starts with the Lloyds of London. You know what that is?
Nah.
They're kind of they were the beginning of insurance. Lloyd's was actually the name of a coffee house in London, where these guys that were basically rich merchants would kind of gather at this. So coffee houses were a brand new thing. Coffee was new. It was coming from the New World, right? So coffee was new, and everybody in Europe was just like drinking coffee and like, right? So they would all get together at these coffee houses, and it became a big thing where the wealthy people would get together there and like hang out and slam coffee and just stay up for 48
That
hours.
started so many great things.
Yeah. So at Lloyd's, the name of the coffee house in London, these merchants, they all owned ships. They all had their own merchant ships out there, and they realized that like, hey, because they're constantly talking to each other, and they're like, so one guy's ship, he's like, man, mine just took off and it's headed for the New World, and like, that was a 70 something day trip, and then you don't hear anything because then it has 70 days for it to come back, a letter to come back and say we made it, right?
Yeah.
So you're waiting like half a year for it just to find out if you're like going to be rich or if you're destitute because the ship went down or whatever. You don't know. So they're like stressing, and they realize like, wait, if we all sell each other parts, like instead of me owning one ship, I just own a piece of everybody's ship,
Right.
and we all do that. So they all sold, like they basically traded shares now where the group of them now just each individual person owned a small piece of each ship. So if a ship
Right.
went down, nobody was destroyed by it.
Right.
Okay, this is the beginning of insurance.
What do you need?
Lloyd's of London is the name of the oldest insurance company in the world.
They were pooling their boats.
That's right.
No pun intended.
That's right. Pooling their boats. So Lloyd's,
We need to get our boats in a larger pool.
it's time to get this boat on the road. So Lloyd's,
That's when Allens have shipwrecks.
right. Yeah, we can tell that story. My dad is like the only person in the known universe who's had 3 shipwrecks, none of them on the water. I mean, none of them anywhere near the water.
Yep. So that's where we have the phrase, let's get this boat on the road.
Yeah, that's right. So Lloyd's began the process, the policy of keeping track of their ships, right? So they kept records. So when you go to look at Lloyd's records or whatever, that's where you find the oldest accounts, like documented, where people were trying to get down all the data they can of ships that didn't show up, that went and they were supposed to go from this port to that port and they didn't appear at that port. So Lloyd's has the oldest of these kinds of records that are available, and they're still around. Lloyd's of London still exists, and they still keep records, right? So in that book, he's going through Lloyd's records that go all the way back to to that period and all the way up to the present, where like Lloyd's is like, ship disappears and then they're having these inquests trying to find out like what happened and like who gets paid, because the ship is gone. And sometimes very strange shit appears during they'll have court proceedings because the ship is, something weird happened to it. And then like they're getting witnesses up there and the stuff that comes out is just crazy. And then the judge at the end will announce like I have no fucking idea what to do with this case, so case closed. No one gets paid.
He stamps it with a giant triangle.
Yeah, giant triangle with a question mark inside of it. And the another strange thing that happens with ships in this deal is that I'm sure most people have heard of the Mary Celeste, which is the deal where the boat goes out. And then they find it later, and there's no one on board, but there's like food on the table. There's like a pot over the fire. Like it was obviously everybody was in the middle of like cooking dinner and getting ready to eat, and then just something happens and they just disappear. And the ship is fine. Like why would you abandon a perfectly good ship to get into a lifeboat? This is the other question. Like most sailors understand that. Because people say, well, a big storm came and the ship was listing and it was gonna go down, so they got on the lifeboat. No, like if the storm has destroyed your ship, your lifeboat is not going to survive the storm. Right? So like getting in the lifeboat because the storm is tearing your ship apart is a bad idea. So sailors don't do that. I mean, people don't do that. Like unless they've panicked or something else is happening, I can't remember the name of the boats or anything involved, but there was a really strange account where the ship had gone missing or whatever, and then like somebody on another boat sees it, they see it, and they approach it, they're trying to hail it, they're calling it or whatever. There's no response. They send a boarding party over. Those people get onto the boat, and everyone on the boat is there, but they're all dead, and they're
Methane gas.
all of their faces. They said that all their faces had these screams on them, that they had these terrible expressions on their faces, like they were all, and they all seemed to be reaching for something.
Asphyxiation. Well, I'm just throwing this out there. Like, if there are massive methane bubbles that have come up, and like one comes up next to your ship, and all this methane is just like everywhere, and everyone dies of asphyxiation.
The way this started was a radio transmission from that ship was received, and the radio operator basically he just starts the transmission by saying that I think he was saying the captain and the first mate or whatever were down in the cargo hold. They were dying. Everyone else was already dead. And then he clicks off.
Holy shit.
People are like, you come back, what? And then like he comes back eventually. He comes back and he says, and now I die. And that was it. So when they find the ship, people are like, what the fuck is going on? They get on there and they find everybody is dead all over the ship, and they have these horrible expressions on their faces, like they were, they were screaming or whatever, and they all seem to be reaching. Like they said that they all seem to be in attitudes of like they were trying to get something or whatever. Everybody, all these bodies all over the place. So then the people on the other boat, so the boarding party's over there. The people on the other boat start calling the boarding party like, get off the boat, because they see smoke starting to come out of the bottom or whatever. So the boarding party barely makes it off the boat, and the whole thing poof, explodes and just goes down. And like that's it.
Yeah.
No evidence. Like there's it went down with the ship. And it was carrying totally non-flammable, non-explosive cargo. Like it's just completely not explained what the fuck happened with that. What killed them, and what the hell that radio transmission was about, and and then why did it explode? And like the idea that the people on this other boat blew it up for whatever reason is ridiculous, because they would have gotten salvage if they could have brought it back. It would have made them rich. Since everyone on that ship was dead, if they were able to bring it back to port, this is why they sent a boarding party over. If they were able to bring it back to port, they could have sold it as salvage. They would have gotten a shitload of money. There's another one that's kind of like that, where they find the boat, they put a boarding party on the boat, like a skeleton crew, on the other boat or whatever, and then I can't remember which one it is, but either the boat that they were originally on or the boat that they boarded disappears again. Like either the boat that they so the boarding party gets on the boat, and then they're like they go to port, but the ship that they came from never shows up and is never found. So there's so many strange ship stories in there, but those, like I said, those are more protracted. They can take place over months, and it's a lot harder to find out what's going on. But the planes, there was an Air Force plane that went down. It was one of the first, not the first, but it was an early jet, right? So it was a fighter jet.
Yeah.
And for completely unexplained, the dude. Okay, so the radar, they're watching him on the radar. So the radar is looking at what he's doing or whatever, and they see this enormous thing appears in the radar, like this huge signature or whatever, and the plane appears to merge with it, like the blip of the plane and this thing that appears in the sky. They come together, and then it's just the thing, and then it disappears, and the plane's not. The blip of the plane is no longer there. They immediately dispatch 2 other jets to go fly. They're like, what the hell just happened? They send them over there. And one of the jets reports that he doesn't see any sign of the plane, but there's this enormous, first he thinks it's an oil slick. He's like, I think there's an oil slick or something in the water, this big disc, this big circular patch. But he says that one side of it's sticking up out of the water.
Whoa.
So of course people are like, flying saucer, but whatever it was, it was this enormous, and then it disappeared. Like he went past, and when he comes back for the second pass, it's nowhere to be seen. There's no weird looking oil slick or whatever. But he says that I think it was like the northwest side or something like that. He gives the direction, is sticking up out of the water. So it was a big dark patch that he initially thought was an oil spot, until he realizes that one side of it's coming out of the water itself. So maybe it is aliens. I don't know. It's.
What were you saying during the break? Like it's like the pyramids of Atlantis are down there.
So one of the theories, of course, is that because this is the Atlantic, and it's the Bimini Road and all that stuff is there. So one of the ideas is that there are pyramids and other things from Atlantis, and Atlantis being some kind of crazy like high technology crystal civilization has weird powerful things down, because the story that Plato tells is that they got incredibly powerful, and they got arrogant in their power, and then the gods destroyed them because of that, right? So the idea is that they have the powerful shit that they were getting arrogant with, they were trying to conquer the world with, is still down there. It's down at the bottom of the sea, and every once in a while they're still active. So every once in a while they'll come on, and then that's what makes disappearances happen.
That's fucking cool.
Yeah. And that actually reminds me of there was a deep ocean survey near I think it's like 40 or 50 miles off the coast of Cuba. So it's like 40 50 miles away from Cuba, but the water's 2 miles deep there. Okay? And they were basically doing a side scanning sonar and deep ocean floor survey, and they found pyramids and ziggurats and shit. There's a whole map of it, and it's under 2 miles of water. This is like way down there. You can't explain this by like the 400 feet that the ice age caused the water to come up. Right, this is 2 miles down.
I want to see that shit.
Yeah, there's some good pictures of it. I mean, they literally they sent. Obviously, it's 2 miles is too far for a person to go down there, right? But they were getting pictures of it with the sonar stuff. Okay, and they were getting. I mean, they could see that there were pyramids, that there were like columns, that there were roadways.
Well, now, I mean, didn't that guy?
Yeah, he dove down in a bathysphere. Yeah, so you could do it now, but at the time,
Okay.
At the time, and of course,
Didn't he go down like freaking 5 miles or 7 miles or some shit?
Yeah, that was the deep
Marianas
something.
Trench.
It was some deep something challenge.
Yeah. Deep sea challenge.
Deep sea. Yeah, I can't remember what it was called, but it was. Yeah, he dove down in the Marianas Trench. It was like 7 miles or something like that.
That's crazy.
And of course, they were expecting it to be a desert, and it was like bursting with life. That no one had, all kinds of he said that they identified 100 species in the first 5 minutes that no one had ever seen before. We don't know shit about the oceans, about the deep oceans, and anything could be hidden down there, including Atlantis pyramids that are knocking stuff out of the sky. I don't know. I kind of don't think that's what's happening, but it could be. It could be a combination of aliens, giant squids, kraken, all the stuff that ancient sailors have said. Like, one of the explanations that sailors gave of disappearances of ships is the kraken.
Yeah.
Which, depending on which culture or how long ago it is you're reading, the kraken is either it looks like it's so big it looks like an island, right? So it's like sitting on the surface, and its back basically looks like an island. It's got weird plant life on it because it's undersea life, but right now it's in the air. So people are like, look at that weird island. They land on it, and then it dives.
That's fucking.
And everybody on the island goes down with it because something that big diving under the ocean sucks you down with it, including the ship. More recently, the kraken is just an enormous cephalopod.
Yeah, but in 25 feet of water for miles, it's crystal clear, and you're
Right.
not really
Probably not a kraken, yeah. Unless he is the reason it's only 25 feet deep.
still sleepy.
That's right.
Well, let's go snorkeling over this beautiful reef.
Yeah, the whole reef is just one tentacle of the kraken. Did I ever tell the story about the guy who actually claimed to find fossilized evidence of the kraken in Australia?
I don't think so.
Man, that was badass. Like, there's an ancient. They thought it was a lake at first. It's central Australia. There's this enormous flat pan desert, salt desert or whatever, and it's not a. It used to be a sea bottom, and they did tests on the particles of sand and shit like that to find out what pressure they were under when they were deposited, and the pressure. The way they're put together told them it was 2 miles deep, right? So the ocean was 2 miles. Like, that part of Australia used to be under 2 miles of water, and it's
But not because the water was rising. It's because the land had sunk.
that's right. So one of the things that interests paleontologists about that whole area of Australia is that it's an enormous fossil bed. Okay, but this guy was particularly interested in this one area where there were shitloads of fossils of called I cannot remember the name. They look like the brontosaurus of the sea. They have the long neck, the long tail, the big fat body, but they have flippers instead of it's like the Ichthyosaurus or something like that. I can't remember what they're called. Plesiosaur is what they are. Yeah. So he said that there were, and he actually wrote a paper on this and delivered it at a paleontology conference, and they flipped out. But he was like, so there were, I think, 14 or maybe 16 complete plesiosaur skeletons in this area. And Brett says he feels useless.
Because he put plesiosaur right after you nailed it.
Yeah. Just this one time. Everything else you just said was great. So he was saying that there were a bunch of plesiosaur bodies there, but they were the bones were dismantled. Like, in other words, they weren't complete, like,
Yeah.
like the skeleton, like the thing had died and laid down there. All the bones were kind of taken apart. But what fascinated him was that the vertebrae, which are huge, the small ones are like dinner plate size and the big ones are huge, right? Table size, had been laid out in this beautiful spiral. Like there was a central one, and the ones in the middle, the vertebrae in the middle, were the biggest ones. And as the spiral arms went out, the vertebrae got smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay. And he said, like, that was intelligently placed. In other words, like that couldn't possibly have been by accident. That all these plesiosaurs happened to die in this one spot.
Yeah.
And
they're called plesiosaur circles. it's this known alien phenomenon.
plesiosaur spiral circles.
Plesiosaur circles. You just walk out into your salt flats and you're like, oh shit, this plesiosaur circle just appeared last night.
Don't get lost in the plesiosaur circle. It can totally disappear if you get in the middle of it.
Yeah. And all the crystals are laid over without being broken.
Yeah. All you have to do is you drop your knees and say, plesiosaur, let me out. Shut up, Kyle. I'm trying to tell the story. So he said that there's a known ocean creature that does this in its den. Okay, it hunts and then it plays with the bones of its prey, and that is like cephalopods, octopus or squid.
Yeah.
Okay, and they did the same thing. They make these weird ideograms in the sand with the bones of their prey. They make these weird designs and shit like that. But this is enormous, and it was plesiosaurs. Okay, so he was like, this is the kraken.
Yeah.
Right? It was an enormous cephalopod that was big enough that its meat, what it ate was plesiosaurs, which are brontosauruses. Like, they're huge, okay? They're, I think, 45 to 80 feet, something like that. They were massive, right? And he said that every single one of these plesiosaurs, by the way, had a broken neck. That's what killed it.
Damn.
So that's so the octopus is like, woof, breaks its neck, takes it down there, like eats it, and then like starts playing with the bones. And he said that the spiral design, at the ends of the spiral arm, there was a bunch of little bones that were made, and he said the pattern that they were made is exactly the same pattern of the suckers on the bottoms of the big, tentacles of cephalopods. The same pattern. The big ones in the middle, going to smaller ones out at the edge, and the same sort of distribution. He said this is a self-portrait that's like hundreds of millions of years old.
That's freaking
of this
awesome.
single lonely kraken at the bottom of this 2-mile sea, drawing his picture of his phone face in the sand.
So it was the first selfie.
Yeah. He had plesiosaur narcissistics.
Yeah.
I gotta make this picture better. I need another plesiosaur.
Yeah.
So eyebrows aren't right. Or maybe it was a picture of his girlfriend. That's what it was.
I've got a 16 mega plesiosaur camera.
That's right. And when you push the button, it goes Kraken. God, we're getting stupid. But the cool thing about this guy is that he went and delivered this paper at this conference.
What did you call the designs that they make? The
Ideograms.
Yeah. He posted it on Ideogram.
That's right. That was his wall, bro. Yeah. I put this plesiosaur picture on my wall on an Ideogram. What if he got any likes on that post? Well, he did get one like 100 million years later. Bling! That one guy.
Yeah, one guy.
That one paleontologist fucking liked your post, bro. So this guy delivered the paper at the conference and got ridiculed. But he went back out into that fucking desert in Australia and found the beak.
Holy shit.
Which is the only
Bone
thing of it, of these cephalopods. So he found the beak and it's enormous. Proven. Kraken.
That's badass.
I mean, yeah, like the whole story is great, but like that must have been great to just go back and be like, hey, I'll use skirt grips. Beak.
Dude, that's so freaking badass.
Yeah.
Where was that?
That was in Australia.
In Australia.
If you look at Australia on Google Earth, you can see that like it's kind of green around the edges, and there's this enormous like orange-red thing in the middle, and it kind of is circular. It was in there somewhere.
That's
That
badass.
that whole place apparently is the salt pans of an ocean that used to be 2 miles deep, according to the particles that it's the salt pans.
Maybe that's where crikey comes from.
Crikey. Yeah, it's a giant kraken. You just say it in a spiral. Crikey.
This is freaking dad joke central.
Yeah, I think we should, on that note, end it.
No, I have one more thing. You mentioned the right before we left the Bermuda Triangle, the Bimini Road.
Yes.
Just what is that, real quick?
Okay, the Bimini Road is a series of either it's either a natural formation or it's not. Okay, but it looks like a wall of megaliths. It looks like a megalithic wall that it follows the coast of the island of Bimini.
Okay. Oh yeah, this is the one they like.
It looks like at first they thought it was a road, but it doesn't really look like a road. It looks like a wall, but it's because people called it a road because it's so wide. But you look at Baalbek and you're like, no, that could be a wall. The megaliths are. But then on
that's the one that was like skirped up. They're like, no, this is just like what happens
rock.
on
Beach rock.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Except that the problem with it being beach rock is that, and you can see this easily on Google Earth. If you go to the island of Bimini, you can find the road. It arcs out from the coastline, and then it takes this hard 90-degree turn. They call it a J shape, but it turns sharply 90 degrees. And beach rock doesn't do that. Beach rock will be
the same.
It'll
sort
follow
of
a
shape
same line, and it tries to follow the coastline. This doesn't follow the coastline, and it takes this sharp curve or whatever. What's also fascinating about the Bimini Road is that if you look at the Peary race map of 1513 or whatever we were talking about it in the Mystery of the Maps, the island of Bimini is in his map, and it shows a megalithic-looking wall structure on that island. Now remember that he was getting his information from incredibly ancient source maps.
Holy shit! That's freaking awesome.
Yeah. So don't listen to the scriptards on that one, because the Bimini Road appeared on this ancient map before anybody fucking even knew the island of Bimini existed. At least no Europeans stuff knew. So
That's cool.
And the other thing interesting about it is the date, or at least the year that the Bimini Road was found. This is 1986 was when it was first noticed and was like. And the guy who noticed it was like a geologist. Okay, he wasn't just a layman. He saw it and he was like, "This is weird," right? Well, Edgar Casey, the guy who we were talking about, the sleeping prophet we were talking about last time, the guy who made all the predictions, who I think if anybody was a prophet, he was. Edgar Casey predicted that in 1986, evidence of Atlantis would be found.
That's badass.
He said direct evidence.
1968.
1968, okay. I had it backwards. 86. Yeah, so 1968, he said that evidence of... And remember that Casey was giving his predictions in, like, the early 1900s. Okay, so he's like... It's a long time ago. And he says in 1968 that people will find direct evidence of the existence of Atlantis. And then in that year, the Bimini Road was found. And it's been controversial ever since. Like,
Yeah, of course.
yeah. And for more reasons than just Casey. It's like, no one wants that to be a megalithic structure, period. But the fact that people connect it to Atlantis because of that year and because of Casey's prediction, it makes the script herbs go even more crazy. It's not a road and it's not Atlantis. Well, it's a wall.
But it's within the area of the Bermuda Triangle, or is
yeah.
it?
Yeah. Case done. Solved.
That's freaking badass, man.
Yeah. Snake facts.
All right.
Yeah. So, thanks to Kyle this time for the introduction. A great introduction and snake bites commercial.
Yep.
And you guys, do us a favor, go on to iTunes, give us thumbs up, multiple stars, great reviews.
Please.
Golden rewards, whatever you can give, plus cash. And also, if any of you are looking for a good podcast app, we use Android and we use BeyondPod, and it's fucking awesome.
Yeah, I don't know if BeyondPod is on the iPhone
it may not,
App Store, but
anybody who has an Android, get BeyondPod.
BeyondPod. I had it for years and never paid for it, and it was freaking awesome. And I finally realized, like, I've been using this app longer than I've been using like any other app that I use.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna pay these guys.
And it costs like 99 cents or whatever.
I thought
$2.
it was like, well, maybe it is. I don't remember. I thought it was like $6.
Could be $6.
But it's totally worth it.
Yeah.
Because like after I did that, it got way more kick-ass.
Yeah, I mean, if you get it and you just get the free version, the main limitation is that you can only tell it to download one thing at a time.
Right.
That's the main limitation that I encountered all the time in the free version. If you buy it, you can say download this.
Yeah. And the other cool thing is if you're concerned about data consumption and you don't want it to automatically do stuff, you can go into the settings and tell it like what to do.
Right.
You know, when it updates.
Only manually download.
Yeah, only manually download, or you can pick specific podcasts that you are definitely going to download, and you can have it automatically download those and not other ones.
Yeah.
It's
capable of logging into, like security feeds. Like in other words, ones where you have to have a username and password. You can put those in there. It will log in. It populates a list of all the available material in the podcast, and you can go through and look. It's great. It's a great app. We've been using it. That's the only podcasting app I've ever used.
Yeah. I actually used a bunch in the beginning, and that one was like by far the most kick-ass, and so I just
and I was like, what podcasting app are you using? He's like, Beyond Pod. So I just downloaded. I didn't have to do any of that shit. It was great. I didn't have to test anything. I've been using Beyond Pod ever since.
Yeah.
So you guys, if any of you are looking for a good Android podcasting app, that's the one we use. And so if you have technical difficulties, we definitely can help you fix it with Beyond Pod.
Oh yeah.
Also, our show notes show up perfectly in it. It's great.
Yeah.
Like you just click on the description of the show that you see in there, and you can scroll down. All the pictures are there and everything. It's great within the app itself.
And they have night mode.
That's right. Dark apps.
Yeah. If they don't have night mode, don't use them.
That's right. Uninstall. No night mode, uninstall. So that's a good app. So you can get that. And let's see. So I talked about the give us reviews. That would be great. And also, is there something else? I keep thinking there's something else. There's probably something else, but we got to go. So
Brett says Bimini is in the Bahamas, right on the edge of the line extending from Puerto Rico to Miami.
Right. So it's right in the middle of the triangle.
Yeah.
You guys can get a hold of us at brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. You can check the blog and comment there if you want to at brothersoftheserpent.blogspot.com. Thanks to Wax Productions, Patron Studios, RK Enterprises, DC and SL Enterprises, the
Smithsonic Studios,
the Science Company, and any other evil, greedy corporations that are involved in helping us do this.
and all of our friends and family and fans. We just really appreciate all you guys.
Yep, we definitely do.
Talking about snakes.
Talking about snakes. So that's about it for this week. We'll see you guys next week, hopefully. Good night, Adamu. Find Atlantis.
Just look out for sea snakes.
Serpent.